Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Jody Myers. One day 20-year-old Jody Myers and her fiancé, 31-year-old Neil Archer, were attending a birthday party for Jody's stepfather. Although the celebration was lively, Neil was not enjoying themselves. Neil was reluctant to participate and chose to sit in Jody's car while she mingled with family and friends by the fireplace. Jody frequently had to return to the car to convince Neil to join the party. Some guests even brought him snacks in hopes of cheering him up. Around 8:30 p.m. Neil and Jody left the party, and their argument occurred at home. Jody's mother, Lucy, received a message from her daughter stating that she couldn't come home that night because she had broken up with Neil, and she changed her phone number. Jody mentioned she would let her parents know where she was later, that she had moved to a different area, and that she had quit her job. Once things calmed down, she promised to explain everything in detail. Jody also assured her mother that she was safe, that her friends were with her, and she also expressed her love for her family. The message was poorly written and lacked punctuation, which concerned Lucy. She noticed several spelling errors, which were also unusual for Jody, who generally had no issues with spelling and grammar. Normally, if she made a mistake, she would quickly correct it, but in this case, she did not. One possible explanation for Jody's behavior is that she was feeling rushed or stressed after breaking up with her fiancé the night before. However, it was puzzling why Jody would take the time to write a message when she was likely overwhelmed. This causes Jody's mother and sisters to suspect that she was not the one who sent the message. Furthermore, Jody would never abandon her 2-year-old son, Elijah, who she had with Neil. Her family was certain of this. Elijah was the center of Jody's life, and she loved him dearly. Friends and family believed that if Jody had intended to leave, she would have taken him with her. This concern prompted the family to report Jody's disappearance to the police. The family members were reluctant to accept that something terrible might have happened, but they were also worried about losing precious time. Doubts began to arise in their minds, and they feared that the police might not take their report seriously, as cases of missing young women who had argued with their fiancés were often overlooked. However, the police treated Jody's family's report with great seriousness. They were particularly concerned that Jody had left her child behind, which was an unusual situation they couldn't ignore. Detectives quickly launched a search, and public worry grew when it became known that someone had used Jody's bank card to withdraw $250 from an ATM in the city center. This raised the possibility that either Jody was nearby and intended to return, or an unknown person was trying to cover up the situation. Jody Myers was officially reported missing, prompting an investigation. Jody's story quickly gained attention especially among investigative teams. Authorities interviewed everyone close to Jody, including her fiancé Neil, but none could provide useful information about her whereabouts. Neil, being the last person to see her, shared details with the police. He revealed that he and Jody had argued on their way home from a party. During the drive, Jody angrily threw her ring out of the window, and the police later searched for it. Neil also stated that he last saw Jody when she got into a red Nissan X-Trail with an unknown man and woman. The police did not disclose that Neil was their main focus. They described him as a valuable witness, but at that point, he was their only person of interest. Extensive searches were conducted in the areas surrounding where Jody was last seen, including local bushland and the Murray River, but no trace of her was found. The ring Jody allegedly threw out of the car also remained missing, despite Neil indicating where it might be. As the investigation progressed, relatives, friends, and acquaintances frequently appeared in the media to discuss the case and share their thoughts. Neil's mother, 57-year-old Margaret Archer, spoke to reporters about her son's partner, Jody. Margaret expressed hope for Jody's return, as she is needed by her son. Meanwhile, Neil addressed the media, responding to their presence outside his house while playing with his son. He took the increased attention calmly, stating only that it was a bit stressful for him, but he was happy to assist the authorities in the investigation. For the purpose of the investigation, the police requested video footage from ATM surveillance cameras and were surprised by what they found. The money had not been withdrawn by Jody or Neil, as they had previously thought. Instead, it was a woman in a hooded sweatshirt, clearly trying to conceal her identity. Detectives quickly identified this woman as Margaret. While her cash withdrawal did not implicate her in murder, she was arrested for theft. It was unclear how Margaret had obtained Jody's bank card and used it after Jody went missing. Margaret might have stolen the card or borrowed it from Jody. Regardless, Margaret strongly denied any involvement in Jody's disappearance, both to the police and in public. After being questioned, she was released on bail. But this unusual situation led investigators to closely examine her actions during the time Jody was missing. Detectives discovered 2 receipts from different hardware stores. Margaret had purchased 10 bags of cement from one store and another 10 bags from a second store, along with a wheelbarrow. These purchases were notable for their large quantity. Investigators needed to verify that these transactions were made by Margaret. They visited the store where Neil's mother had gone 3 days after Jody's disappearance. After reviewing the surveillance footage, they confirmed that Margaret had indeed bought a large amount of cement. However, they questioned why she needed so much. While buying construction materials is not illegal, detectives still needed to understand the context of those purchases. The purchase had been made with the exact amount that Margaret withdrew from the ATM, which left the police confused, until they spoke with Margaret's husband, Lawrence. He explained that on the day Jody went missing, he was in Tasmania. When he returned home, his son Neil told him he had a Father's Day gift. Since Neil rarely showed generosity, he was intrigued. Neil led him to the yard, where a freshly poured concrete slab lay in the shed, which Neil had just finished. Lawrence was surprised, as he thought of Neil as lazy and selfish, but he could see that his son had done a lot of hard work. He thanked Neil for the gift and began sharing stories about his trip to Tasmania. As the detectives listened, they began to connect the dots, realizing that Neil was no longer just a witness. He was now the main suspect in Jody's disappearance. At the same time, Neil's brother, Aaron Archer, felt guilty because he knew something, but was afraid to speak up for fear of implicating his family. Aaron was hesitant to carry out certain tasks requested by relatives. When he learned something troubling, he urged Neil to go to the police, but Neil refused. With no other option, he went to the station and decided to share everything he knew. On September 24, 2015, at midnight, Aaron met with police officers at a predetermined location. Following his brother's visit to the police station, Neil was taken into custody and charged with the murder of his fiancée, Jody Myers. The next day, investigators searched the home of Margaret in Murray Bridge, a town about an hour and a half from Adelaide. During this search, forensic teams discovered a woman's body buried in a shallow grave beneath a concrete slab in the shed. This slab had been a Father's Day gift for Lawrence. Experts later confirmed that the body was Jody Myers, who had been missing for a month. Investigators indicated that the evidence suggested a violent murder had taken place. Afterward, Lucy's son-in-law, Michael Bates, publicly expressed the family's hopes for Jody's safe return until they received the tragic news. Her death created a profound loss for them, but they cherished the loving memories of her as a mother, daughter, and sister, emphasizing that she was not to be blamed for anything. From that point on, the family was left with only memories, which they considered their most precious treasures. A few months later, Margaret was arrested for her alleged involvement in Jody's murder. Despite the charges, Margaret was working hard to prove her innocence. It is believed that Neil's father, Lawrence, was unaware of the events surrounding the case. Then, investigators have built a detailed narrative into the Jody Myers case. After returning home from a party, Jody and Neil had a severe argument, Neil felt that he had not impressed Jody's parents and believed they wanted him and Jody to break up. In a moment of rage, he lost control and strangled Jody with the cord of his hoodie until she stopped breathing. Later, reports surfaced that while in jail, Neil told other inmates that his mother had been present during the argument and had restrained Jody, although this claim could not be substantiated. The following day, Neil asked his mother to help him hide the crime, and Margaret, without hesitation, agreed to dispose of the evidence related to the murder of Jody, who had given her a grandchild. She withdrew cash from the ATM to buy cement and added $10 to Jody's phone to send a message to Jody's family. It became clear that Neil pressured his mother to handle all the illicit activities for him. Margaret had previously been a victim of domestic violence herself, which makes it even more perplexing that she would agree to cover up such a tragic crime. Many people find this behavior abnormal, regardless of a mother's love for her child. It is difficult to believe she would justify helping him in such a horrific situation. However, some parents claim they would do anything for their children, and Margaret likely belonged to this group, which is truly disturbing. Even more alarming is the fact that Jody's 2-year-old son, Elijah, partially witnessed the incident. He was sitting in the car while Margaret visited hardware stores and made purchases. It was also revealed that Elijah was in Margaret's house when Neil transported and buried his mother's body in a shed. As the case progressed, new information shocked the public. The police recorded phone calls between Margaret and Neil discussing how to hide the crime. Both felt guilty and unable to find a solution to their problem. During their conversations, they also mentioned Neil's brother, Aaron. Margaret attempted to involve her second son, and later his half-sister, in the cover-up. She pressured them to burn clothes and destroy evidence, such as cement bags. However, Aaron cleverly refused to comply and eventually reported the situation to the police. In 2016, Neil Archer pleaded guilty to the murder of Jody Myers. In 2017, he was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 22 years. This outcome is relatively favorable by Australian standards, and it is reassuring that the murderer accepted his guilt. In South Australia, a guilty plea can lead to a sentence reduction of about 30%, but the judge determined that Neil did not merit this reduction. Jody's friends and family were pleased with the verdict. Meanwhile, Margaret Archer hesitated until the last moment to admit her wrongdoing. She changed her story and confessed. Her lawyer claimed that Margaret had always lived a good life and cared deeply for her large family. However, considering that she waited until the very end, unwilling to confess to the crime, one can easily conclude that Margaret felt no remorse for her actions. In 2018, she was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison for aiding a criminal. Then, she was released in June 2022. Meanwhile, little Elijah is being cared for by his grandmother, Lucy. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Alice Trapler. On April 19, 2012, an incident occurred in a remote area of upstate New York. At approximately 11 p.m., Frank Bennett called 911 to report that an intruder had broken into his home and killed his son, Daniel Bennett. After the attack, the intruder fled the scene. Frank reported that he did not witness the crime. He was in the basement when he heard the front door open and the lights turn on. A short time later, he heard a loud bang. Frank quickly ran upstairs, but when he reached the first floor, he only heard the sound of cars on the street. The mysterious intruder was gone, leaving behind a lifeless body. When the police arrived, they found Frank outside the house, in shock at what he had witnessed. The father could not believe that his beloved son was dead, and he was also afraid that the killer might return. After calming down, Frank's account was confirmed. The police entered the house and found Daniel lying on the sofa in the living room. It appeared that he had been attacked unexpectedly while he was sleeping. After examining the crime scene, forensic experts quickly discovered a spent ammunition box outside the door. It was clear that this was not a robbery because no valuables were missing, and there were no signs of a struggle or forced entry. The attacker had acted quickly, suggesting that the murder occurred in just a few seconds. However, the motive behind the crime remained unclear. Given the situation, the police suspected that it might be due to personal reasons. They began investigating Daniel's family and friends to gather more information. Frank suggested a possible motive for this violent act. His son was scheduled to appear in court the next day to fight for custody of his 5-month-old daughter, Lily. The divorce with Alice had been very difficult. Police considered Daniel's wife, Alice Trappler, to be the prime suspect in the case. Alice Trappler grew up in a small town called Edison. However, she was born in Philadelphia, where she lived with her parents before they bought a farm away from the city to raise their children. After graduating from high school, Alice moved away, attended college, and began working on a construction site in Texas. She eventually returned to Philadelphia and became a successful landscape designer. Alice was an energetic girl from a small town. As a child, she was a bit mischievous, but that did not affect her close relationship with her parents. She often drove 4 hours to Edison to visit them on weekends. During one of these visits, she met Thomas Wesley Borden, who became her first husband. This meeting took place in 2002. He had a troubled past, having dropped out of school in the 9th grade. Then a series of troubles began to plague him. Thomas often stole small items, had no steady job, and frequently worked as a repairman on local farms. This was his situation when he met Alice. He immediately fell in love with her vibrant and energetic personality. Thomas was attracted to Alice's natural beauty and intelligence. They had similar personalities, as they were both energetic and outgoing. At the time, Alice was in a relationship with another man, but she ended it for Thomas, and their romance quickly blossomed. Within 6 months, they were married and moved to Philadelphia, where Alice owned a house. Thomas supported Alice in everything. Alice had always dreamed of having a large family, but she struggled to conceive. Therefore, she took on the role of stepmother to Thomas's 2 daughters from a previous marriage. However, after only a few months of living together, Alice realized that she did not truly understand Thomas and had rushed into the marriage. At first, she tried to control their situation, but soon discovered that Thomas was unpredictable and irresponsible. He would often leave home for days at a time, leaving Alice and the children behind. This behavior frustrated Alice, while Thomas grew tired of her worries. Moreover, he showed little concern for Alice's feelings. Although she tried to maintain the marriage for 4 years, Alice eventually lost patience. She did not want to leave Thomas's children, to whom she was very attached, in the care of their irresponsible father. So, she filed for divorce and also requested custody. In 2009, a challenging trial began, with neither side willing to compromise. Finally, they reached an agreement that the girls would live with their paternal grandparents, who would take good care of them. Thomas's children still visit Alice in Edison regularly. After moving in with her mother in 2010, Alice bought an old farmhouse. She renovated the house, making use of her construction skills. Her business is thriving and is expected to grow even more in the near future. Overall, her life has improved significantly since the divorce. She has yet to realize her dream of having children of her own and rarely sees Thomas's children. Living alone has become boring for her. Her life changed dramatically when a new man, Daniel Bennett, entered her life. They met online in late 2010. He also grew up on a farm and is a strong man who always helps his parents with hard work. Daniel has a stubborn personality and can be rude, but he has never been in trouble with the law. In February 2011, Alice learned that she was pregnant. Overjoyed, she shared the news with Daniel, who was also delighted and decided to move in with her. They soon got married, But Alice's controlling nature soon emerged. She wanted to control every aspect of their lives, while Daniel valued his freedom and did not like being controlled. This led to frequent minor disagreements. These conflicts escalated, resulting in increasingly irrational arguments over small issues, which left Daniel frustrated. Just 6 months after meeting, the couple decided to split after Alice hit Daniel over the head with a coffee pot. He moved out, calling her crazy, and returned to live with his parents. However, Daniel still wanted to be involved in his daughter's life after she was born and sought to share custody, so he made an effort to maintain a relationship with Alice. Daniel contacted her almost every day to check on her well-being, but Alice never responded. She ignored all his messages, which frustrated him. Their relationship was strained. Alice often behaved rudely and even threatened him. She said that their communication felt like a conflict. In addition, she refused to see him and was hostile on the phone. It seemed that she did not want to maintain a relationship with him and did not want him to be a part of their child's life. 7 months after their separation, a baby girl was born. Alice did not inform Daniel about the birth and forbade him from seeing the child. This was a significant blow to Daniel, who had been pleading to see his daughter. However, Alice remained steadfast in her decision. So Daniel sought legal help to resolve the situation. According to the lawyer, the mother had no right to deny the father access to his daughter, but to prove this, a trial was necessary. Consequently, Daniel filed a lawsuit in family court to gain access to his child. The proceedings could be lengthy. Finally, a court date was set for April 20. This was a hopeful moment for Daniel, but the hearing never took place. He was murdered in his home the day before. Officers who arrived at the scene spoke to neighbors, some of whom confirmed hearing a loud bang just before an SUV drove away. The front door of the house was open, and Daniel was found dead. The only evidence was a spent 12-gauge cartridge case. A ballistics test is pending, which may provide further clues. Frank said that Daniel often complained about Alice's controlling behavior, especially after they split up when she forbade him from visiting their daughter. After breaking up with Alice, Daniel moved in with his father. On the day Daniel was killed, he was relaxing in front of the TV after a long day at work and fell asleep just before he was murdered. Frank also recalled that last Christmas, Alice called him out of the blue and asked to meet so he could see his granddaughter. He was delighted and agreed, but he used the opportunity to convince Alice to allow Daniel to see their child. He believed that children should have a relationship with both their father and mother. However, Alice became defensive and firmly stated that she would never allow Daniel to see their child. Frank was extremely upset, feeling that Alice's decision was both illegal and unjustified. He believed that Daniel would make a great father and saw no justification for Alice's restrictions. After Alice's call, Daniel sought legal help and went to court, but his hearing was repeatedly postponed until it was rescheduled. Tragically, a murderer disrupted all his plans. The police quickly established a motive for the crime, believing that the connection was not random. First, they needed to talk to Alice, who arrived at the courthouse at around 5 a.m., the day after the murder. Just hours later, Lily's custody hearing took place. The police considered her the prime suspect, and at that time, she was living in Edison, 30 kilometers from the scene of the tragedy. Alice was surprisingly calm when she heard the news of her ex-husband's death. When the police spoke to Alice, it was clear that she was very angry with him. She recounted that he had often insulted her and had been abusive throughout their time together. Alice described Daniel as a bad person who struggled with drug addiction. She also mentioned that they were in a custody battle over their daughter, a legal struggle that Daniel had initiated, and that she was determined not to give in to him. Despite this hostility, Alice insisted that she had nothing to do with the murder. She claimed that she had an alibi for the time of the incident, stating that she was at home with her mother, who later confirmed her story. When asked about a handgun, Alice denied ever having used it, and the police confirmed that the weapon was not registered in her name. However, this did not eliminate her as a suspect, as she could have purchased the weapon illegally, and her alibi was not entirely reliable. Unfortunately, the police were unable to find any information that could advance the case. They then chose to investigate Daniel's other acquaintances and friends who might have had a motive for the crime. Many describe Daniel as a difficult person who frequently got into fights at bars. As a result, the police identified several potential suspects who had conflicts with Daniel in various ways. They compiled a long list of these individuals and began interviewing them. Although each had grievances against Daniel, none had a strong motive for the murder. The investigation was losing momentum, and it was clear that a vital lead was needed, as there were too many angry residents in the city who might want to take revenge on him. It was necessary to narrow down the list of suspects. One of Daniel's neighbors went to the police station after the murder. While she was getting the mail, she discovered a shotgun shell casing on the road. Concerned, she reported her discovery to the sheriff's department. At first glance, the shell casing did not seem unusual since hunting season had just begun, and many people in rural areas used that type of ammunition. However, because it was close to the crime scene, it had the potential to be important evidence. When the police arrived, they compared the shell casing to the one that caused Daniel's death. They found that they were an exact match. The police were then able to trace the shell casing to the store where it was purchased. They searched the area around where the shell casing was found and discovered 3 more shell casings. All of these had been purchased from the hunting section of a local Walmart. This discovery provided a vital lead in the investigation. The police requested surveillance footage from the store and reviewed it. They identified a man who had purchased the boxes of ammunition just 4 hours before the murder, around 7 p.m. The footage clearly showed him, and the police were able to track him as he left the store, including his license plate, thanks to outdoor cameras. The police quickly identified the owner of one of the vehicles as Thomas West Borden, Alice's first husband. While this footage was not enough to convict him, it was a clue for the police to investigate Thomas further. They had 2 main suspects, Alice and Thomas. It was likely that they had planned to kill Daniel together. While Thomas could be considered a potential perpetrator or accomplice, the only evidence against him was the purchase of the ammunition. Alice was not officially considered a suspect because she had an alibi confirmed by her mother. The GPS on her phone showed that she was at home, but the seasoned police officer suspected that she might be the mastermind behind the events. The police contacted Thomas, asking him to come to the station for questioning without providing a specific reason. They hoped to indirectly confirm their suspicions through him. However, Thomas informed the police over the phone that he was out of town at the time of the call. He could not provide an exact date for his return, saying that he could be absent for 2 weeks to a month due to important business. He then stated that unless the police had a warrant for his arrest, he had no intention of going to the police station over a minor matter. This situation raised suspicion, and he understood why they wanted to talk to him. As the phone conversation continued, Thomas became increasingly anxious. At one point, he suddenly declared that he would kill himself if the pressure did not ease. The police realized the urgency of the situation and knew that they needed to quickly locate Thomas before he did anything drastic. They decided to track the GPS location of the call and found him near a cell tower in a suburb of Philadelphia, along with his car. Soon, the pursuit began. The chase lasted only a few blocks before Thomas abandoned his pickup truck in a parking lot and fled on foot. However, another police unit arrived to stop him. Thomas gave a false name, but when asked for identification, he surrendered his driver's license. When the officers discovered the lie, they acted quickly to arrest him. Thomas began to run away again, leading several cars and police officers to chase him. They pursued him to the nearest train tracks, possibly because he intended to use the train to escape and distract the police. However, Thomas was exhausted and realized that he could not outrun them. In a moment of desperation, he jumped in front of a train and took his own life. Some even blamed the police for his death. This development left the police without their only lead regarding Daniel's murder. In their desperation, the police decided to talk to people who had interacted with Thomas in the days before his death. Thomas's half-brother Nathan Hand lived with him. Shortly before Daniel's murder, Thomas had moved in with Nathan, and they spent a lot of time together. During this period, Thomas rekindled his relationship with Alice and felt happy, as he had struggled to cope with their breakup. He had hoped to reunite with her, so he agreed to resume contact. However, Nathan suspected that Alice had an ulterior motive for returning to Thomas. Nathan said that just before the incident, Alice had made a request regarding Daniel. For the sake of the person he loved, Thomas agreed to everything and followed Alice's instructions. Nathan recalled that at around 8 p.m. on April 19, Thomas returned from Walmart and quickly began preparing for something important, saying that he would confront Daniel at Alice's request. Nathan observed that Thomas was wearing camouflage pants, a dark shirt, and a mask. When asked about his plans, Thomas insisted that he would confront Daniel. Nathan tried to dissuade him, but to no avail. Thomas asked Nathan to drive him to Daniel's house. During the drive, Thomas revealed that he not only intended to beat Daniel, but also to kill him. He was determined to get rid of Daniel once and for all. Despite Nathan's attempts to convince him otherwise, Thomas also mentioned that this plan originated with Alice. He kept in touch with her throughout the evening via phone and text messages. When they arrived at Daniel's house around 11 p.m., Thomas retrieved the weapons from the trunk of the car. He claimed that Alice had given him the weapons for this purpose, and that he had purchased the ammunition. They got out of the car and stood on either side of the front door. Nathan pushed the door open and turned on the lights, allowing Thomas to rush inside and kill Daniel. They then fled the scene, jumping into the car and driving away. As they left, Thomas threw the remaining shell casings out the window, landing in a neighbor's yard and eventually leading the police to their door. Nathan claimed that they buried the weapons at the park. Police were able to locate the weapon based on Nathan's description. He also mentioned that Alice was not present during the attack. She was at home and was in contact with Thomas on the phone. Nathan was arrested in connection with the crime. On April 24, a deputy sheriff visited Alice's home, and she denied any involvement in the crime. In 2013, Alice went to trial for the murder of Daniel Bennett. She was charged with multiple crimes, facing a possible sentence of 15 years to life in prison. By this time, Thomas, the real perpetrator, was dead. The prosecution argued that he was just a pawn controlled by the real mastermind behind the crime. They believed that Alice had planned and manipulated Thomas into carrying out the act. The prosecution gathered a significant amount of evidence that linked Alice to the crime. Evidence included correspondence between her and Thomas discussing the case, as well as surveillance camera footage showing Thomas purchasing ammunition. Additionally, Thomas's half-brother Nathan confirmed Alice's involvement in the crime. Nathan Hand reached a plea deal to shorten his sentence by pleading guilty to manslaughter in exchange for helping to solve the case, resulting in a 9-year prison sentence. The defense attempted to exonerate Alice, acknowledging her hostility toward Daniel. They argued that the situation was an act of self-defense, claiming that Alice had endured domestic violence for 6 months. They asserted that Alice, a victim of violence as a child, was determined to prevent her daughter from experiencing the same, which explained her strong opposition to sharing custody with Daniel. After deliberations, the jury unanimously convicted Alice Trappler of premeditated murder. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Throughout the trial, she remained calm, showing no remorse or emotion. Alice expressed dissatisfaction with her 25-year prison sentence and filed several appeals, all of which were rejected. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Noreen Boyle. John Boyle Jr. is a chiropractor in Mansfield, Ohio. He has a successful practice, which is considered one of the best in the state. John and his wife, Noreen Boyle, have been married for over 20 years and have 2 children. In 1989, their eldest son, Collier, turned 11. They also adopted a 3-year-old daughter from Taiwan named Elizabeth. Noreen was born into a working-class family in Philadelphia and worked as a dental hygienist. She supported John through his schooling in the early years of their marriage, but after Collier was born, she became a stay-at-home mom. Thanks to John's successful career, the family enjoys a comfortable life. Their children attend private schools, travel, shop, and experience the World Cup without financial worries. Although the couple appears to be a model family from the outside, John has a disturbing personality. He was often abusive to his wife and displayed controlling behavior. Furthermore, he was unfaithful. John frequently pursued relationships with other women, a fact known to his friends, family, and Noreen. For years, she tolerated his behavior in an attempt to preserve the marriage for the sake of their children, despite being aware of his infidelity and his constant pursuit of younger women. Whenever she confronted him about his affairs, he reacted violently. In general, John could not tolerate any criticism of himself. Noreen's son, Collier, also felt the effects of his father's behavior from a young age. However, this situation could not last forever. In December 1989, Noreen filed for divorce. John did not want to end their marriage because he was happy with his family life and relationships. In an attempt to save their marriage, he planned to move his family and private practice to Erie, Pennsylvania, nearly 2 hours away from their old home. Their situation was not as promising as he had hoped. John persuaded Noreen to stay for New Year's and to continue working on their problems afterward. The family celebrated the holidays at their old home, with John's mother in attendance. He asked his mother to babysit the children because he planned to leave again after midnight when everyone was in bed. Later, Noreen and John argued on New Year's Eve. Elizabeth, the youngest daughter in the family, was confused by the situation, and Collier was worried. John's mother put Collier to bed, and just as he was about to fall asleep, he suddenly heard Noreen's loud scream, followed by 2 thuds, as if something had hit the wall, and then silence. Afterward, someone walked around the house for a long time, even opening the door and standing in the doorway for a while. Collier was so frightened that he pretended to be asleep and stayed that way until morning. Despite his fear, 11-year-old Collier got out of bed early on January 1. When everything was quiet, he explored the house. His mother was missing, but John seemed to be either awake or not yet asleep. Collier asked his father where his mother was. John replied that she had left after their argument. He assured Collier that she would be back soon, and John's mother agreed with him. The boy waited for Noreen to return, but days passed without her. Shelley Bowden, Noreen's best friend, had been in close contact with her, especially during her divorce. Shelley was quick to criticize John's claims about Noreen's disappearance. She had planned to meet Noreen for lunch just after New Year's to discuss important matters, but Noreen never showed up and ignored her calls. This behavior was completely out of character for the Noreen she knew, and Shelley worried that something was wrong. Shelley repeatedly stressed that Noreen would never abandon her child under any circumstances. Out of concern, Shelley reported Noreen missing to the police. However, the police dismissed her concerns and reminded her that adults have the right to go wherever they want. without informing anyone. Shelley argued that Noreen was a responsible woman who would never leave her child, especially a 3-year-old who needed her. Collier picked up the phone book, found the police station number, and reported that something was wrong with his mother. The police responded quickly and went to Noreen's house. When they arrived, they immediately noticed that the boy looked scared and desperate for help. Unfortunately, they were unable to communicate effectively, but the police could see the fear in Collier's eyes, especially when he glanced at his father. When John asked the police who had contacted them, they did not reveal the truth, lying that one of Noreen's relatives had called. However, the police accepted John's explanation that she had simply left after an argument, and everyone believed it. Noreen was reported missing, and weeks passed without anyone questioning John's claim that she had left. However, Collier could not believe that his mother would abandon him. After hearing Noreen's relative's story, the police returned to Noreen's house. They searched every room thoroughly, but found no alarming evidence. Forensic experts examined the house and found no signs of foul play. Despite this, the police were able to speak to Collier, who recounted what he had heard on New Year's Eve, including Noreen's suspicious screams and banging on the walls. There was strong suspicion that John was involved in his wife's disappearance. Collier's sister, Elizabeth, who was 3 years old at the time, may have witnessed the incident. She told the police that she saw her father hit her mother on the head, then put her on the floor and wrapped her up like a snowman. However, due to her age, her testimony was not considered in the investigation. Soon after, a pregnant young woman named Sherry Lee Campbell moved into their home, replacing his wife. John claimed that Sherry was not pregnant with his child, and that they had only met after his wife had gone missing. He said that he had taken pity on Sherry and offered to let her stay. He also mentioned serious problems in his marriage and stated that Sherry would leave when his wife returned. While investigating the missing persons case, the police discovered revealing information about John's personal life. It turned out that his relationship with Sherry had been going on for much longer than he had admitted. There was a strong possibility that she was pregnant with his child, casting doubt on his story. Despite alarming details that raised suspicions, no concrete evidence was ever found, and Noreen remains missing. Furthermore, the theory that she ran away seems implausible. She had not made any purchases, used any credit cards, or contacted her children or relatives for weeks, which was highly suspicious. While examining the house and piecing together the events of Noreen's final days before her disappearance, the police learned that Noreen had been suffering from John's betrayal and infidelity for years. Sherry was the one having an affair with John, which drove Noreen away from her family. Sherry claimed that she only started dating John after his wife went missing, which was clearly untrue. Collier sought help because he was afraid of staying with his father, whom he believed was a murderer. While searching John's car, Collier discovered a photo of Sherry taken before New Year's. He considered showing it to the police. The photo was taken in front of a new house, so they decided to visit that location. Unfortunately, John refused to let them in, and they needed evidence to obtain a search warrant. More than 2 weeks after Noreen went missing, the police began to take the case more seriously, as her prolonged silence raised suspicions. Police discovered John's banking activities. They discovered that during the time Noreen was reported missing, John had made suspicious transactions. John rented a drill and purchased cleaning supplies from a hardware store, as well as quick-dry cement. He also frequently filled up gas in Erie, possibly during his visits to the new home. The investigation has now shifted its focus to the new house, as no evidence of a crime was found at the John family's old home. Collier said he noticed a ring on Sherry's finger that belonged to the boy's mother. He told his father this directly. The situation became more concerning when John told Collier that they were going to a neighboring state for fun the next day. He suggested a trip to a forest in the Highlands, which sounded very ominous and raised fears for the boy's safety. When the police arrived at the newly renovated house in Erie, it was clear that John had put a lot of effort into both the interior and exterior. However, the investigation focused on finding clues related to Noreen's disappearance and rescuing a boy from his father. The police searched the house meticulously, as such environments could hide bodies or evidence of a crime. The most intriguing discovery was in the basement. In a nearly empty room that was being renovated, they found a new carpet. When the rug was pulled back, they discovered a rectangle of freshly poured concrete. This anomaly caught the attention of the police, prompting them to investigate further by removing the concrete. While removing the concrete, they detected the smell of a decomposing human body. After completely removing the floor, they found a makeshift grave containing the body of a woman. Everyone immediately believed that this was Noreen's body. In the 3 weeks since her disappearance, the body had decomposed significantly. The condition of the body was so poor that dental records were needed for identification. Collier did not have to go with his father into the woods, where the boy could have been in danger. The police found the necessary evidence, ensuring that the boy was taken to Child Protective Services, where he would be safe. However, Noreen's tragic death was a huge shock to Collier. The boy had a deep bond with his mother. Noreen was not only his mother, but also his best friend. After discovering Noreen's body in her new home in Erie, the police found an expensive watch on her, which also served as a means of identification. Noreen's relatives noticed that her wedding ring was missing. According to a forensic expert, Noreen died between the night of December 31 and January 1. The police interviewed potential witnesses, especially neighbors who may have seen something unusual. A key witness was a man who lived next door and was awake from midnight to 4 a.m. on the night of the murder. He reported observing suspicious activity at John's house. Around 3 a.m., he saw John arrive with large bags. In the days that followed, John returned to the house frequently, working for hours and picking up heavy bags, which he then loaded into his car. The police suspected that the bags contained soil and construction debris, possibly related to the creation of a grave in the concrete floor. Interestingly, Sherry was wearing a ring that was identical to Noreen's missing ring. Collier could easily recall the ring his mother had worn, especially since there was a memorable story associated with the gift his mother had shared with him. This made him instantly recognize the ring on Sherry's hand. The police later learned that John had taken the ring from Noreen to give to his new partner, Sherry. Upon learning of this, Sherry was furious and immediately ended her relationship with John. The police then questioned John's mother, who had been with the children on the night of the incident. She claimed that she had not heard anything suspicious and vehemently denied any wrongdoing. Collier recalled an argument between his parents that he had heard before falling asleep. He was suddenly awakened by a terrifying scream and a loud bang on the wall, followed by silence. The police determined that John had inflicted a serious head injury on his wife. He then wrapped her head in a plastic bag, presumably to conceal any blood at the crime scene. John then went to check on his son, Collier. Collier vividly remembered his father standing in the doorway, staring at him. During this time, the boy pretended to be asleep, instinctively sensing danger. Collier now looks back on that moment with horror, wondering what his father might have done if he had realized that the boy was awake and had heard everything. Despite John's meticulous planning, he failed to create a credible story to explain his wife's disappearance. John cleaned the house thoroughly, leaving no forensic evidence of the crime. No traces of Noreen's DNA were found in the vehicle used to transport the body. Clearly, John was meticulous in his actions. When John struck his wife on the head, he avoided breaking the skin, resulting in no blood. He quickly covered her head with a bag, indicating intentionality. The pickup truck left no evidence, and not even the plastic bag covering her head left any fingerprints. Killers often leave traces on objects they forget to clean, but John was meticulous. He ensured that the entire crime scene was cleaned up after Noreen went missing. The police discovered circumstantial evidence. 2 days before his wife's death, John rented a drill, indicating that he was planning the murder. During the same period, he purchased cleaning supplies and quick-drying cement. John loaded his pickup truck with construction debris, waste, and soil, and drove to a location where he could dispose of it without restrictions. This decision turned out to be a serious mistake. When the police investigated and analyzed the debris, they confirmed that the concrete came from the basement of John's house. He had a motive to get rid of his troubled wife, Noreen, without going through a costly divorce. The investigation uncovered strong evidence against John, and Collier, who was only 12 years old, became a key witness. He understood that he would have to testify against his own father in court, which would greatly strengthen the prosecution's case. The prosecutor's office indicated that John could potentially face a prison sentence. For Collier, meanwhile, the situation posed difficult challenges. He struggled with the stigma of being known as the son of a murderer. Collier harbors resentment towards his father for taking away his mother through his terrible actions. John's defense team developed strategies to challenge the prosecution's case. They focused on undermining the prosecution's methods, arguing that many rules were ignored when interacting with child witnesses. Notably, no adults were present during many of the interviews, which the defense claimed was illegal. Furthermore, the defense believed that the police may have influenced the child to provide information that would incriminate his father in his mother's death, thus violating due process. John attempted to create a strong alibi to prove his innocence. He even convinced his brother to lie to the police, claiming that Noreen had called him. This made the investigation even more difficult for the police. The lie was exposed when it became clear that Noreen had died before that date. Despite this false testimony, John's brother did not face any charges. John's reputation as a successful chiropractor helped him maintain a positive image in the community. He was seen as a family man and a good father. He and Noreen had adopted a baby girl, and John was ready to have more children. At the time of the murder, Sherry Lee Campbell was pregnant and was able to prove that John was the father. Throughout the investigation, many questions arose about Sherry. Did she know about John's plan to kill his wife, or was she involved in the crime? These suspicions were fueled by her previous involvement in a real estate scam. A real estate broker reported seeing a young woman who looked like Sherry with Dr. John. However, the police found no evidence linking her to the crime or indicating that she knew about John's murderous intentions. She testified against him in court and cut off all contact with him afterward. Nevertheless, some people still believe that she may have had a role in the events that occurred. John's legal team presented their own arguments against the case. They identified errors in the autopsy report and even tried to argue that the body found in the basement was not Noreen's, but that of someone else who had been buried there earlier. However, the results of subsequent examinations confirmed that it was indeed Noreen's body, reinforcing the police's belief in John's guilt. As the jury deliberated, the atmosphere became tense. John Boyle Jr. was convicted of the premeditated murder of Noreen Boyle, and due to aggravating circumstances, was sentenced to life in prison without parole. His lawyers subsequently appealed several times. In 2010, John requested a review of his sentence and sought clemency. Initially, the request was denied, but it was later granted, allowing him the opportunity for early release after 20 years. John's defense team continued to fight for him even after his 2020 parole hearing. For nearly 30 years he had denied killing his wife, but he eventually changed his story. John admitted to Noreen's death, but it was clear that he had been dishonest. His real intention was to have his sentence reduced and go free. He showed little remorse, claiming that he had pushed his wife in a fit of rage, causing her to accidentally fall and hit her head, resulting in her death. He refused to discuss other actions that suggested he had planned the crime. As a result, his request for parole was denied, and he remained in prison. John's family shunned Collier, and Noreen's relatives were unable to adopt the boy because they were too old. He was adopted by a caring family in Canada. As he grew older, Collier changed his last name. He initially worked as a magazine model before becoming a successful cameraman in Los Angeles. He eventually teamed up with a renowned director and produced a documentary in 2018 that recounted the story of his mother, Noreen Boyle's death, as well as his fight for freedom and the horror of his father's crimes. While making the film, Collier visited his father in prison nearly 30 years after John was convicted of murder. During their meeting, John claimed that he had accidentally killed his wife during an argument when she lunged at him with a knife, and he instinctively pushed her away. Collier did not believe his father's story, but chose to forgive him. Despite this, John still harbored resentment toward Collier and did not consider him part of his family. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ted Shaughnessy. Ted Shaughnessy, born on February 7, 1963, is the youngest of 3 children. His family lived near Phoenix, Arizona. From a young age, all the siblings in the family developed a love for fast cars. Ted dreamed of owning sports cars and was passionate about everything related to them. Relatives and friends described Ted as a kind and fun-loving person. In the early 1980s, he met a woman named Corey at a hair salon in Phoenix. They began dating, and in the late 1980s they got married. The couple later moved to Austin, Texas, where they started a jewelry business together. Corey had a deep passion for gems and fine arts, and worked as an appraiser in their family business. In contrast, Ted was friendly and approachable, easily building relationships with customers and partners, which helped secure profitable deals while keeping everyone happy. Their family business continued to grow, and they bought a new house near their store. By 2000, the couple still had no children. In the spring of 2000, they traveled to Ukraine and adopted a 1.5-year-old boy, whom they named Nick. This moment marked the long-awaited beginning of parenthood for the family. Over the years, Nick grew up and developed a love for fast cars, just like his father. To share these experiences, Nick and Ted often went go-karting together, and Ted also took his son for rides in a sports car. Over time, Nick began to show an aptitude for business. He started selling chocolate bars from his school locker and always had pocket money. While in high school, he developed a hobby of disassembling cars. In 2015, he met a girl named Jackie Edison, who had recently moved to Texas from New York. The two were immediately attracted to each other, but Nick's parents, Ted and Corey, disapproved of Jackie, feeling that she was not the right person for him. However, they chose not to interfere in the relationship in order to maintain a good relationship with Nick. After high school, the couple moved into a house near a university. Jackie planned to study engineering, while Nick pursued a business degree. During this time, Nick also became interested in trading. Despite living far from home, he still made the 2-hour trip to Austin every weekend to visit his parents. Life seemed to be on track, and there was no sign of trouble ahead. Early in the morning of March 2, 2018, at 4:30 a.m., Ted and Corey were awakened by the sound of their dog barking. This was not unusual, as dogs often react to possums or other small animals that sometimes wander onto the family property. Corey believed there was no reason to worry. Ted decided to go check out the disturbance. Since the couple lived in Texas, he brought his .45 caliber pistol for protection. According to Corey, she quickly fell asleep after Ted left to investigate. However, just a few minutes later, she was awakened by a loud bang coming from the kitchen, followed by several more. Panicking, Corey grabbed the gun she had left by the bed and ran to help her husband. As she stepped out of the bedroom, she noticed their dog. Suddenly, she was shot while standing in the doorway, and a dark figure appeared, looking menacing. In a panic, Corey fired all 6 bullets from her pistol toward the door, unsure of who or what was there. After firing, she ran into the closet to hide, fearing for her life and expecting the intruder to find her and shoot her. While in the closet, she grabbed her phone and called 911. She reported that someone had broken into the house and that she had shot one of the attackers. During the call, Corey heard faint moaning coming from somewhere in the house. She couldn't identify who was making the sound. Worried that her husband might have been injured in the gunfight, she felt an overwhelming urge to go help him. However, the police insisted that she stay in the closet, warning her that it might be too dangerous to leave. 15 minutes later, Corey was notified that the police had arrived at her house. By then, the moaning had stopped, and an eerie silence had fallen over the house. Cautiously, Corey walked out of the closet and toward the front door. As she passed through the kitchen, she saw her husband, Ted, lying motionless on the floor, surrounded by bullet casings. Overwhelmed with shock, Corey tried to open the front door, but found no one there. It turned out that the police had gone to the wrong house. At the time, they were at a neighbor's house, trying to determine where the gunshots had come from. They eventually realized their mistake and rushed to Corey's house, where they found her trembling on the doorstep. The officers quickly got back into their car and drove to Corey's home, arriving around 8 a.m. There, they met Corey, who was deeply distressed and struggling to process the events that had unfolded. Although still in shock and uncertain about the details, she knew her husband had died. Over the next 3 months, Corey's son Nick and his girlfriend Jackie moved in with her to provide support. Friends and acquaintances of the family were horrified by the tragedy. Ted was described as a kind and hard-working man who had built his life with integrity and deserved to spend his later years in peace. No one believed he had any enemies capable of such a violent act. Speculation soon arose that the motive for the attack might have been linked to the family's wealth, as their home contained many valuable items. Police examined the crime scene and found 2 different types of ammunition, suggesting there were 2 attackers, each using a different handgun. There were no signs of forced entry, but police discovered an open window in a distant bedroom, where a surveillance camera had been removed. It appeared the attackers had entered the house through this window. A forensic scientist discovered fingerprints at the scene, which were immediately sent to a lab for analysis. In the room where Nick had been staying, police found a chest of drawers that had previously held a .40 caliber handgun. However, the gun was missing and turned out to be the only item stolen from the house. Since the caliber matched one of the guns used in the shooting, police suspected it was the murder weapon. After interviewing the Corey family and their neighbors, police learned that the family owned a high-value jewelry store, which was well known in the area. Corey, her son Nick, and Jackie surrendered their cell phones to assist in the investigation. Nick, who had an alibi because he was 2 hours away from his parents' home at the time of the attack, supported his story with phone records and the security system he had installed at his parents' house. However, the security system had been turned off on the night of the shooting, which immediately raised suspicions. Nick explained that this was not unusual, as his parents sometimes left the system off when they were both at home. Nevertheless, even when the system was in sleep mode, it still recorded some activity. Police discovered that the criminals likely broke into the house at 4:27 a.m., which was the exact time the system was disabled. The next signal from the system was recorded at 4:44 a.m., giving the criminals only about 17 minutes to search the house. Rumor had it that the house contained millions of dollars worth of jewelry, gold, safes, and other valuables. However, nothing appeared to have been stolen, making robbery an unlikely motive. Adding to the mystery was the strange behavior of the family dogs. How could they neither hear nor smell the intruders and fail to alert the family for 17 minutes? Dogs would normally bark even if an unfamiliar car stopped in the driveway. Clearly, something was wrong. The first person the police suspected was Corey. Suspicion fell on her because she was the sole beneficiary of Ted's life insurance policy, which was set to pay her $1 million. Shortly after her husband's death, she contacted the insurance company to file a claim. She argued that, after her husband's death, the company he managed began to face serious challenges. Sales dropped significantly, customers left, and delivery problems arose, creating an urgent need for money. However, the insurance company denied her claim because she was already a suspect in her husband's murder. This was how Corey found out she was under investigation, much to her outrage. Nick and his girlfriend Jackie were also considered suspects. When the police searched Nick and Jackie's home, they discovered a marriage certificate. It turned out that the young couple had secretly married 8 months earlier, without informing their parents. Nick's mother only learned about the marriage through the police, which shocked her. Corey gave Jackie a piece of gold jewelry adorned with diamonds as a wedding gift. Shortly after, Nick and his wife took over the family jewelry store. These changes seemed to help Corey cope with the pain of his loss. Meanwhile, the police received the results of the fingerprint analysis from the window of the Corey family home. The fingerprints were found to belong to the installer who had installed the window years ago and had not returned since. This man lived in Minnesota, not Texas, and had a solid alibi. However, the police could not disregard the window, as it appeared to be the most logical point of entry for the perpetrator. During an interrogation, one of the officers noticed that Nick repeatedly mentioned using the window to enter his house when he came home drunk from a party, or when he did not want to wake his sleeping parents. Interestingly, the police had not told him that this could have been how the intruder entered the house. In another interview, Nick mentioned his best friend, Spencer Patterson. The two had been close for years, and Spencer frequently visited Nick's family home. Spencer, who came from a poor background and disliked his job, may have secretly envied Nick, who was wealthier and more fortunate. Nick had told Spencer that a particular window in the house was often left unlocked, which the police believed could have been the intruder's entry point. Spencer was also familiar with the layout of the house, including the location of the family safe and gun boxes. During one of the interviews, Nick revealed that he had previously given Spencer a .380 caliber pistol. This detail raised suspicion because cartridges of the same caliber were found at the scene of the massacre, linking it to one of the murder weapons. The police decided to question Spencer, who admitted that he was familiar with the window in question and had visited Nick's house several times. Spencer also handed over the .380 caliber pistol that Nick had given him. However, after conducting a ballistics test, it was confirmed that the gun was not used in the murder, proving that Spencer was not involved in the case. Spencer, however, pointed the police toward another, more likely suspect, Nick. The police could not ignore the fact that Nick was eager to propose numerous theories about the case, none of which proved useful. This raised suspicions about whether he was involved in Ted's death. Throughout the investigation, Nick's behavior drew attention. The day after the murder, he independently questioned the neighbors as if he were taking over the investigation. When the police conducted fingerprint and DNA tests on everyone present in the house, Nick's behavior was notably strange. It was discovered that Nick was experiencing significant financial difficulties. His business ventures were unprofitable, and he had spent all the money his parents had given him. Nick's independent projects had stalled, and he showed no intention of finding a job. For a long time, his parents had supported him, covering all his expenses, but they had hoped he would eventually become self-sufficient. Just before the tragedy, Nick's parents had loaned him $30,000 with the intention of funding his future college education. However, instead of pursuing his studies, he spent the money on trading, as he had always done. Disappointed, his parents decided to stop supporting him financially, hoping this would motivate him to take responsibility and start building his own career and life. To reinforce this, they asked Nick and Jackie to live separately. His parents believed that living apart from his girlfriend might encourage him to consider college, much like Jackie. Instead, Nick borrowed another $5,000 from a family friend and continued gambling it all on trading. He ultimately failed and never repaid the loan, Police suspect that these financial troubles may have been the motive for the attack. However, Nick had an alibi. It seemed likely that he did not personally shoot his father, so the police needed to determine who had committed the crime. The police returned to Nick and Jackie's home. This time, they found several bullet boxes, with the brand and caliber of the bullets matching those found at the crime scene. The investigation also uncovered another lie. Nick had previously claimed that he had not visited his parents' home for a long time, but the police discovered that he had been there just a few days before the tragedy. Although Nick denied this, the police obtained irrefutable evidence proving he had lied. Another suspicious detail emerged. 2 days before the attack on Ted, there was an unusual gap in the communication records between Nick and Jackie. The two had been in regular contact via phone and text, but during this particular period, they had stopped communicating entirely. When their cell phones were examined, it became clear that the devices had been deliberately wiped clean shortly before the investigation began. Many messages had been edited or deleted, and the phones had been factory reset. However, they had overlooked the fact that all the data had been backed up on a computer. The reason behind their hasty attempt to clean the phones soon became clear. Turns out the couple was facing much more serious financial troubles than Nick had disclosed to his parents. The police decided to question Spencer again, suspecting that he was withholding information. Spencer eventually confessed that, shortly before Ted was murdered, Nick had approached him with an offer to pay him to carry out a murder. The plan was to kill both of Nick's parents. If the plan succeeded, Nick would inherit about $8 million, including business assets. Spencer revealed that he had been promised a share of the money. However, Spencer refused to commit the crime, prompting Nick to threaten to kill him if he revealed anything about the plan. Corey, shocked and refusing to believe the accusations, hired Austin's best lawyer to defend Nick. She believed that Nick had been victimized by the same arbitrary police actions she had experienced during the initial investigation. On May 29, 2018, Nick and Jackie were arrested for solicitation of murder, a crime punishable by death under state law. 2 months later, Jackie was released on bail. Corey had hoped that Nick would soon be cleared and released, but the situation took a drastic turn when the investigation exposed the real culprits. Police reviewed surveillance footage from the house, dated February 28, which showed 2 unidentified men. One of them was later identified as Cameron Vosmek, an employee of a window company whose fingerprints had been found early in the investigation. Upon contacting the window company, authorities confirmed Cameron's identity. When police visited his home again, Cameron was absent. Instead, they spoke to his wife, who immediately admitted she knew the reason for their visit. She revealed that her husband had denied any involvement in the crime, but implicated his co-worker, 25-year-old Johnny Leon. When police located Johnny, he initially denied any wrongdoing, but eventually confessed. Johnny revealed that Nick had offered him $100,000 to kill someone close to him. Johnny admitted to being an accomplice, overwhelmed with guilt to the point of requesting the death penalty for himself. He confessed to using a .40 caliber gun provided by Nick, a weapon that had previously been reported missing from Ted's home. Police further discovered that Nick had disabled the security system on the property. This revelation horrified Corey, who now faced the devastating reality of her son's true nature. She realized that for 3 months after Ted's death, she had unknowingly lived under the same roof as the person who had plotted to kill her. Nick attempted to justify his actions, claiming that his father had been suffering from chronic depression and that he was merely aiding his father by ending his life. Corey staunchly refuted Nick's claim, asserting that Ted had no history of mental health issues. Meanwhile, Nick's wife, Jackie, denied any involvement in the crime, claiming ignorance of her husband's plans. Jackie initially refused to cooperate with the police and sought to avoid responsibility. However, it later emerged that she had been aware of Nick's intentions. Jackie claimed she had tried to dissuade Nick from proceeding with the crime, but her statement was met with skepticism. Although she could have warned the police, Jackie chose not to. Jackie eventually agreed to cooperate with the investigation, which earned her release on bail. She testified against Nick, resumed her college education, and returned to her daily life. Meanwhile, authorities identified the second accomplice in Ted's murder as Ariane Smith. Despite the severity of their crimes, Nick Shaughnessy, Johnny Leon, and Ariane Smith avoided the death penalty by striking plea deals with the prosecution. In April 2021, they each pleaded guilty to lesser charges and were sentenced to 35 years in prison, with the possibility of parole. As of June 2023, all three remain incarcerated. Jackie received a much lighter sentence for her cooperation. She served 4 months in prison and was placed on 10 years of probation. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Ronald Jansen. In 2007, a terrible tragedy occurred that still haunts the local community. Fortunately, the perpetrator was caught and is now serving time for his crime. However, the length of the sentence has sparked much debate and raised several questions. Annick van Uytsel, a kind and humble girl, enjoyed spending time with her friends. She excelled in school and had big dreams for her future. On the evening of Friday, April 27, 2007, Annick chose to celebrate the end of the school week with her friends. She attended a Catholic gathering held at a small house in the countryside. Unlike the usual parties that can involve alcohol, drugs, and unhealthy activities, this event focused on providing safe and spiritual education for young people. The attendees ranged in age from 6 years old to teenagers and even adults up to 35 years old, all gathered to sing, play games, chat, and share their thoughts. That night, the atmosphere was filled with joy, laughter, and friendly conversations. Annick, who had been dancing with her friends, forgot about everything else. The party continued until 4 a.m. Afterward, Annick chose to cycle home with her friends. At a crossroads in the woods, they parted ways. In the morning, Annick's parents grew worried when she did not return home or even call. They began searching for their daughter, who was not answering their phone calls. Annick's parents learned that she had left the party at 4 a.m. and had not been seen since. She had not contacted anyone, which was unusual for her. Her family and friends joined in the search for Annick. Desperate to find their daughter, her parents contacted the police. They quickly took over the case and began searching for her. An official investigation was launched to understand the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. The idea that Annick had run away was quickly dismissed. All of her belongings were still at home, and she had not mentioned any plans to leave her parents. Annick had no boyfriend or savings to go out with. She was not depressed, had no conflicts, and had no enemies, so there was no reason for her to end her life. The police questioned her parents, friends, and everyone who attended the Catholic gathering. But no one seemed suspicious, and no one witnessed anything unusual. The police mapped out the route Annick took home that night. They meticulously checked the road, the corners, and all the surveillance camera footage from cameras along her usual route. Unfortunately, there were no cameras in the woods where she disappeared, leaving the investigation without any significant evidence. The police even explored other possible paths in the woods. There was speculation that Annick may have changed her route due to a fallen tree, or that she may have had an accident while cycling and was waiting for help. However, neither she nor her bike was found, as if they had disappeared completely. The police concluded that Annick was likely the victim of a crime, possibly a kidnapping, but no ransom demand was made, which was concerning. Despite this, people still hoped to find her alive, and the investigation remained active. The search was one of the largest in the country's history. In addition to the police, hundreds of volunteers were involved, including mounted officers, dogs, and helicopters. Police interviewed all local residents near the club and the area where Annick went missing, but no one had seen her. All efforts seemed to be in vain. Her parents distributed flyers with their daughter's photo and put up posters of Anik everywhere. They spoke to the media, begging for their daughter to come home and for any witnesses to come forward. The lack of leads made Anik's disappearance even more puzzling. Police found no signs of a struggle, no belongings belonging to Anik, and no other clues. They tried to track her missing cell phone, discovering that it had been turned on and off several times that night and the next morning, connecting to cell towers. Police and search teams scoured the areas where Anik's phone signal was detected but found nothing. On the evening of May 3, 2007, a passerby walking along the canal saw a large package floating in the water. Concerned, he called the police. At the time, the whole country was on high alert for Anik's disappearance, and the man feared that the package might contain her body. When divers arrived, they struggled to retrieve the package because it was unusually heavy. Upon examination, they discovered human remains inside, carefully packed with 2 bricks to weigh it down and prevent it from floating. The killer may have underestimated the strong currents of the canal and the effects of decomposition. Identifying the victim proved difficult due to the state of decomposition and water damage. A forensic expert was only able to confirm that the remains belonged to a girl. Police suspected that it could be Anik, who had recently gone missing, and her dental records eventually confirmed this. An autopsy revealed that Anik had died from blunt force trauma to the head, with a fractured skull and signs of assault. The news devastated Anik's family, who had hoped for her safe return. The brutal nature of the murder raised concerns in the community, highlighting that the perpetrator was dangerous and posed a threat to society. The investigation faced significant challenges. Although the area where the body was discovered was thoroughly searched, no evidence was found that could help solve the case. The only potential clue was Anik's missing bicycle, which may have had the attacker's fingerprints on it. More than a year later, on August 26, 2008, Anik's bicycle was found 50 kilometers away in Leuven. It was discovered in a suspicious location, suggesting that the perpetrator had deliberately hidden it. Additionally, the bicycle had been repainted. Unfortunately, the perpetrator had been very careful to remove any traces, and no fingerprints or other evidence were recovered from the bicycle. On January 3, 2010, almost 3 years after Anik's disappearance, emergency services responded to a report of a fire. Firefighters discovered an Opel Corsa burning on the road. When they arrived, they found 2 bodies inside the car. The car belonged to Kevin Paulus. Dental records identified the deceased as Shauna Appletans, 18, and Kevin Paulus, 22, the car's owners. However, autopsy results showed that their deaths were not caused by fire. Both had been shot before the car caught fire. Authorities believe the couple was murdered, and that the car was deliberately set on fire to destroy vital evidence. The shocking murder in this quiet community has had a profound effect on both locals and the police. Fear has spread throughout the area, with many people reluctant to leave their homes and their teenage children being prevented from going out. The public is calling on the police to quickly identify the perpetrator and restore safety to the community. When the police investigated Kevin's background, they discovered that he had a history of violence. Kevin was Shauna's boyfriend, and it is believed that he even knew Anik. The police found Anik's bicycle in Leuven, where Shauna lived. This suggested a potential connection between the 2 murders. As the investigation progressed, Kevin was named as a possible suspect. Police believe he may have killed Anik first, then his girlfriend Shauna, before setting fire to her bike to destroy the evidence and taking his own life. However, this theory requires further investigation to be proven. The police are focused on gathering evidence of his guilt, but their efforts are hampered by a lack of witnesses and direct evidence linking Kevin to the crimes. Soon after, a new suspect emerged: Ronald Jansen, Shauna and Kevin's strange neighbor, identified by other residents. People around said that Ronald often argued with Shauna and even fought with her. Kevin stood up for her. It seems that there was considerable tension between the neighbors, raising the question of whether this conflict could escalate into murder. Ronald is a teacher known to be responsible and serious, a model teacher respected by both his colleagues and students. At first glance, he seems unlikely to be involved in any criminal activity. However, he has been summoned for questioning in connection with the cases of Anik, Shanna, and Kevin. Ronald maintained his innocence, claiming that he had spent the day at home watching TV and had not gone out. Since he lived alone, no one could verify his alibi. Ronald stated that the conflicts between him and the young couple, Kevin and Shanna, were due to their constant insults and rude behavior, which led to arguments. He denied ever fighting with them, describing himself as a polite person. However, the police found his statements concerning because they were not convincing. They obtained a search warrant for his home, and during the search, they discovered a gun hidden in a bag of cat food. Ronald could not explain why he had the gun and quickly became agitated. Eventually, Ronald admitted to killing Shanna and Kevin. He explained that on the evening of January 2, he could not sleep and went outside. While he was out, his noisy neighbors, Shanna and Kevin, arrived and immediately began taunting and insulting him, as they often did. In a fit of rage, he lost control and ran home to get a gun and 3 gas cans. Upon returning outside, he found that Shanna and Kevin had already left. He knocked on their door, and when Shanna answered, he threatened her with the weapon. He forced them both into his car and drove away from the city. Kevin was driving. Ronald was in the front passenger seat, holding a weapon and pointing it at Kevin, while Shanna was in the back seat, unable to escape. She cried and begged Ronald to let them go. They drove for about 30 minutes until Ronald found a suitable deserted area. He ordered them to stop and shot Kevin twice in the temple, killing him instantly. Frightened, Shanna began to cry even louder and begged for her life. Ronald demanded that she be intimate with him, promising to release her afterward. Reluctantly, she agreed. However, after they were intimate, he realized that he could not spare her life because she might call the police. Coldly, he killed her as well. Ronald then moved Kevin's body into the trunk of his car, drove to a location closer to his home, and burned the car to destroy all evidence. He walked home through the fields and arrived at 4 a.m. Once home, he showered, burned his clothes, and threw the murder weapon into a ditch. Despite a thorough search, the weapon was never found. Ronald knew how to evade justice, so he carefully washed the blood and gunpowder residue off his hands. Eventually, Ronald Jansen was arrested, and the police began collecting evidence to prosecute him. Ronald was born on February 6, 1971, in Borsum, Limburg Province, Belgium. He was the third of 4 children in his family. His father worked as a miner, and his mother was a cleaner. Despite being a diligent student, Ronald faced bullying from his classmates due to his speech difficulties. Frustrated, he attacked his bullies with a baseball bat, which resulted in his suspension. After this incident, his mother enrolled him in another school, but the challenges continued. At home, Ronald suffered physical and mental abuse from his father. The fear of returning home and the constant violence caused him to have trouble sleeping. At one point, Ronald considered taking his own life or harming his father. Ultimately, he chose the latter. Ronald's father was diabetic and required insulin injections. Ronald switched the insulin with a dangerous substance, which his father accidentally injected. Although his father survived, he realized what Ronald had done. Instead of reporting Ronald to the police, he chose to abuse him even more. As a result, Ronald ran away from home and moved to a distant place. Using his skills, he enrolled in a university and eventually moved to Leuven. To support himself during his studies, Ronald worked part-time. Although he earned little money, he managed to save. In 1993, he graduated and began his career as a teacher. During his final year of study, Ronald met a girl named Natalie. She was from the Netherlands, 3 years older than him. and both attractive and kind. The young couple developed a strong relationship and began dating. After 2 years, they got married. For a while, they moved frequently because of Natalie's job. However, Ronald easily found teaching positions and quickly became a respected educator at every institution he joined. Eventually, they settled in Lochsbergen, where Ronald began teaching not only computer science, but also mathematics and economics at the university. Intelligent, well-educated, and approachable, Ronald became popular among his colleagues and students. He enjoyed hiking outdoors, which helped him manage his insomnia. Ronald and Natalie dreamed of having a large family. Their first daughter was born in 1998, followed by their second daughter 3 years later. Unfortunately, having children began to put a strain on their marriage. Misunderstandings and conflicts arose between them. Ronald, who had long struggled with sleep problems, found it even harder to rest due to the constant crying of his newborn. His persistent insomnia made him irritable and aggressive, which frightened Natalie. Natalie went to the police and accused Ronald of abuse. She claimed that Ronald had given her sleeping pills and abused her while she was unconscious. Ronald denied the accusations, stating that he had given her the pills to calm her down and that everything between them had been consensual. The police doubted Natalie's testimony, and the case was eventually closed. Following this, Natalie filed for divorce, took the children, and left Ronald, who stayed behind and lived alone. He did not make an effort to maintain contact with his children. Neighbors often saw him wandering around at night, seemingly due to insomnia. Although they found his behavior strange, they were not particularly concerned. Had the police taken Natalie's accusations seriously, some of the subsequent tragedies might have been prevented. From the information available to them, it was evident that Ronald was a cunning man. His intelligence allowed him to destroy evidence and evade responsibility. Criminals like Ronald are among the most difficult to catch, and holding them accountable for their actions is an extremely challenging task. Surprisingly, Ronald admitted to killing Anik in 2007 and confessed to 3 other instances of abuse committed in a dormitory in Leuven during his university years. He claimed that he did not know the victims' names, could not remember the dates of the attacks, and could not describe the victims because it was too dark to see their faces. Ronald insisted that Anik's murder was accidental. According to Ronald, he could not sleep, so he drove to another city, where he encountered Anik cycling through the neighborhood. He blocked her path with his car, frightening her. Anik abandoned her bike and tried to run away, but Ronald caught her, tied her hands, and forced her into his car. He brought her to his home. Ronald claimed he had no intention of abusing or killing her, stating that he only wanted her to sleep in bed with him overnight and planned to release her the next morning. However, the next morning, Ronald got into an argument with his neighbors, Shauna and Kevin, who insulted him. Fearing that Anik might remember his identity and report him to the police, Ronald decided to kill her. At the same time, he also decided to abuse her. Ronald hit Anik in the head with a hammer in the bathroom and wiped the area with cleaning products to eliminate evidence. However, the police did not believe his explanation. They suspected the murder had a much deeper motive, and it appeared that Ronald had planned to kill her. The public was shocked when the truth was revealed. No one could believe that Ronald, a seemingly respectable man, could have committed such horrific crimes. Ronald's attorney sought to highlight his mental abnormalities and requested a psychiatric evaluation. Experts concluded that, although Ronald displayed certain psychological deviations, he was competent to stand trial. Psychiatrists described him as a latent psychopath and a serial killer who acted with intelligence and precision. His crimes followed a calculated pattern, beginning with abuse, breaking into dormitories to attack girls, and culminating in murder. Ronald has shown no remorse for his crimes. His humble and unassuming appearance helped him avoid suspicion. Ronald Jansen's trial began in late September 2011. The jury convicted Ronald Jansen of murder and abuse, Given his high risk of reoffending, the judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In Belgium, a life sentence does not necessarily mean that the convicted individual will spend the remainder of their life in prison. Typically, those serving such sentences are imprisoned for between 15 and 23 years. After serving 15 years, Ronald will be eligible to apply for parole, which could potentially allow him to be released early. The families of the victims and others were outraged by the lenient sentence given to Ronald, who was responsible for taking at least 3 lives and abusing several young girls. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Megan Hargan. In 1983, Steve and Pamela Hargan welcomed their first daughter Megan, and 2 years later, their second daughter Ashley was born. Almost 8 years later, in 1993, they had another daughter, Helen. However, tensions within the family began to rise. Steve and Pamela started to argue, which ultimately led to their divorce while the girls were still young. Pamela received custody of the daughters, and soon after, she and the girls relocated to Potomac, Maryland. Pamela loves and cares for her daughters as well as for her work. She worked for a decade as a human resources manager before advancing to vice president at a large company. Neighbors noted that her daughters got along well and often played in their backyard with their pets. Due to her job requiring travel both domestically and internationally, eldest daughter Megan helped her mother raise her youngest sister Helen. Pamela's career peaked when her company merged with an international scientific applications corporation, resulting in a significant increase in her income. Despite this, she remained very diligent in her charity work and regularly donated part of her income to help people in difficult circumstances. She also provided generously for her family, ensuring her daughters had everything they wanted. Thanks to her professional success, Pamela was able to purchase a stunning property worth millions in a trendy area of Fairfax County, Virginia. The family's lifestyle was enviable, and Pamela took pride in her daughters, serving as a role model for others. However, they also faced envy from some. Beneath their seemingly perfect life, the family encountered common issues. As the girls grew older, a rivalry developed between them. Pamela noticed that Megan was facing the most difficulties due to her parents' divorce. This led her to develop feelings of jealousy and resentment towards her younger sister, Helen. She expressed her frustration by accusing their mother, Pamela, of favoring Helen. Her resentment deepened after Helen graduated high school and, like their mother, enrolled at the University of Dallas in 2014. At university, Helen became friends with a young woman named Erin. Initially, Erin viewed Helen as a modest and shy girl who rarely smiled. However, as they got to know each other better, they formed a close friendship. Erin discovered that Helen was actually a kind and sincere person dedicated to her studies. Despite her family's wealth and good standing, Helen took a part-time job as a waitress at a restaurant near the university. It was there that she met Carlos Gutierrez, a 30-year-old from Texas. They quickly started dating, becoming nearly inseparable. In 2017, Helen's middle sister, Ashley, got married at the age of 32 and moved out of the family home. Megan, the eldest sister, also married at 34 to Frank, a man from West Virginia, and they had a daughter named Molly. When Frank went to serve in the military, Pamela welcomed Megan and Molly into her home, allowing them to stay as long as needed. That same year, Helen graduated from university. Although she had intended to move in with Carlos, she returned to Pamela's home in Virginia, where her older sister Megan and 6-year-old niece Molly were living. At that point, Pamela was pleased with her accomplishments and, at 63, intended to retire. She decided to renovate a house she planned to buy for her youngest daughter, Helen, in Northern Virginia. This decision upset Megan, who had always felt that her mother favored her younger sister. Over time, the relationship between the sisters, Megan and Helen, became very strained. Tamara North, the sister of Pamela and the girl's aunt, later confirmed this. She noted that Megan harbored feelings of resentment towards Helen. Having cared for Helen since she was a child, Tamara observed that Megan was unwilling to acknowledge her younger sister. Unlike Ashley, Megan refused to help care for Helen from the moment she was born and would not play with her. Although the rivalry was clear, no one could have predicted that this mix of jealousy, envy, and later greed would lead to a tragic outcome. On the evening of July 14, 2017, the neighbors of Pamela quickly realized something was wrong when they saw the Fairfax County Police arriving at the estate. The emergency call had come from Carlos, Helen's boyfriend, who was in Dallas, Texas, and far from the scene. He expressed concern for Helen's well-being after she had called him with a strange story about a shooting. When the police arrived at the building, it was already too late. Upon inspecting the premises, they discovered the body of Pamela lying face down in the bathroom, covered with a blanket. It was evident that she had suffered a fatal head injury. Moving to the second floor of the spacious house, they found Helen in her bathroom. She was sitting on the toilet, with a weapon between her legs and pointed upwards. It appeared that after killing her mother, Helen had ended her life by using her socked toe to pull the trigger after removing her shoe. As the investigation progressed, detectives realized that their initial hypothesis might not be correct. A family secret began to come to light. Officers secured the area around the house and interviewed neighbors. Detective Brian Byerson, who was leading the case, reached out to Steve, Pamela's ex-husband, to inform him of the tragic events. Overwhelmed with grief, Steve immediately called his other two daughters, Ashley and Megan. Megan, the oldest sister, said she was driving her daughter to West Virginia, but immediately turned around to go to her family's house. When Ashley and Megan arrived, both sisters were in shock and crying while speaking with the police. They both believed that Helen had ended her life, especially Megan. She recalled that when she left the house at 1:30 p.m., with her daughter Pamela and Helen were angry. She noted that both Pamela and Helen were very upset. Helen was particularly distressed because their mother had stopped helping her buy a house. Pamela, their mother, disapproved of Helen's relationship with Carlos and did not want Helen to move in with him. Besides, Megan said that Helen had been feeling angry and depressed for the past few months. During questioning, Ashley confirmed that Helen had previously faced emotional issues and had once talked about self-harm. Ashley also mentioned that their mother, Pamela, suspected Helen of using banned substances and wanted to seek help for her. A weapon found next to Helen confirmed that it belonged to Megan's husband, Frank. He had brought the weapon to Pamela's house because he had seen two suspicious men nearby a few days before the tragedy occurred. He requested that the police examine Megan for gunpowder residue on her hands. This was particularly important because Carlos's earlier statement had led the police in a different direction in their investigation. To uncover the truth, they needed to gather all available evidence, regardless of how confusing or insignificant it might seem, until the full story emerged. After a thorough investigation that lasted over a year, the lab confirmed the presence of gunpowder residue on Megan's hands, indicating that she had recently used a weapon. An autopsy revealed that Pamela had been shot twice, while Helen had only suffered one bullet wound. However, it was determined that the path of this bullet to Helen's neck was at an angle inconsistent with a self-inflicted gunshot. During the investigation at the scene, detectives noticed several unusual details. Pamela's phone was found on top of the blanket covering her, which seemed unnatural. Furthermore, no fingerprints were found on Helen's phone, despite the fact that she had called and texted Carlos before her death. There was also a small amount of blood on the weapon, raising suspicion since she should have had more blood if she had ended her life. This suggests that someone else pulled the trigger. Additionally, Megan's DNA was found in the bag with the weapon. which could be explained by her having brought the weapon into the house and handled it. Investigators discovered documents detailing Pamela's bank accounts and passwords, but these could not be used as evidence because they were not included in the search warrant. The day after the incident, Megan was allowed access to the property and belongings. When police conducted another search later, they included the albums and documents in their report, but they could not find them, indicating that someone had removed them. The strongest evidence against Megan, apart from Carlos's testimony and the police's suspicions, came from her own actions. Detectives found that just days before her mother and younger sister were killed, she was trying to buy a house for herself. She claimed she had her mother's financial help to close the deal, but in reality, she frequently changed jobs and had only $30 in her bank account. On the day of the murders, Megan needed to deposit over $400,000 to secure the purchase of her dream home. Court documents revealed that Megan was struggling financially and had tried to illegally transfer $420,000 from her mother's bank account, Pamela. Her plan was thwarted when Pamela's bank alerted her about the attempted transfer, prompting her to freeze the funds. This information was reported to the detectives by the finance department of the company, which became suspicious of the transaction and later learned about Pamela's death 5 days afterward. After the murder, Megan was called in for questioning again and was informed about the results of a fraudulent money withdrawal. Initially, she said that Pamela had wanted to transfer the funds. However, her story changed when investigators presented a recording of her conversation, and she admitted to calling the bank. Despite this, she continued to deny any involvement in her mother and younger sister's deaths. Investigators uncovered further evidence that Megan was responsible for the deaths of her mother and sister, and that she staged the incident to make it appear that Helen had killed their mother before ending her life. According to the investigators, Megan's motivation was jealousy. She felt that her mother favored her younger sister, which had troubled her throughout her life. When their wealthy and successful mother offered to buy Helen her own house, but refused to do the same for Megan, this left Megan feeling depressed and hopeless. Consumed by envy, resentment, and a desire for money, she was driven to commit these acts. The police believed that Megan had premeditated a double murder. 2 days before the incident, she spoke about suspicious men in their neighborhood, seemingly to explain the presence of the weapon in her home. Megan contacted the police to report the presence of strangers in the area. She also said that many other neighbors had similar concerns. On November 9, 2018, nearly a year and a half after Pamela and Helen's deaths, Megan was arrested at her new home in West Virginia, which she had purchased following the incident. The police held a morning press conference to announce her arrest. Detectives from the Serious Crimes Unit stated that Megan faced 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of using a weapon during the commission of the murders. Detective Brian Byerson reported that during a search of Megan's apartment, investigators uncovered crucial evidence, including a spreadsheet containing bank details and account passwords. These details were originally found in Pamela's house, but later vanished under mysterious circumstances. Megan has now appeared in court to face charges for the murders of her younger sister and mother. The final hearings in this controversial case occurred in March 2022. Alongside a significant amount of circumstantial evidence gathered by the prosecutors, one key factor in securing a conviction was the compelling testimony of Carlos Gutierrez. Carlos struggled to control his emotions as he continued his testimony. He explained that he asked Helen to leave the house, but she expressed concern for her niece Molly, who was also inside. Carlos could hear the fear in her voice over the phone, realizing how terrified she was in that moment. During subsequent calls, Helen mentioned that she could hear her mother, Pamela, dying. It seemed that Helen was following Carlos's advice to hide in a safe place, but when Carlos tried to reach her an hour later, she did not answer. Worried, he called 911 to report the situation. However, since he was in Texas, the operator informed him that they needed to contact local authorities first. After multiple calls to different numbers, Carlos finally managed to report that someone had died at the specified address and that he feared for Helen's safety. The prosecutor's office reported that Megan attacked Helen at 1 p.m. Around 1:15 p.m., Megan took Helen's phone and pretended to be her to reassure Carlos, claiming that she was fine. Ashley, the middle sister who was pregnant, also testified. She expressed regret that her son would grow up without knowing his grandmother and aunt, and that she could never have imagined that a killer was in their home. Megan's defense maintained that Helen was the one who killed Pamela and then ended her life, insisting that Megan was innocent. They argued that the police initially accepted this version, stating that Helen attacked their mother in the head after becoming upset when her mother changed her mind about buying her a house. After 13 days of trial, on March 28, 2022, Megan Hargan, who is 39 years old, was found guilty of murdering her mother, Pamela Hargan, and her younger sister, Helen Hargan, on July 14, 2017. The jury recommended a sentence of 20 years to life in prison for each murder. During the sentencing hearing in October, the judge sentenced Megan to 2 life terms in prison, following the jury's recommendations. However, on November 9, 2022, a judge overturned her double murder conviction due to juror misconduct. This decision was made after it was discovered that one juror attempted to recreate how Helen might have ended her life. The prosecutor announced plans to retry Megan for the crimes, and she remains in custody awaiting the new trial. In September 2023, Megan Hargan was tried and convicted a second time for the murder of her mother and younger sister. She was sentenced to life in prison in January 2024. After the verdict was announced, a trembling Megan leaned on her lawyer for support, while her younger sister Ashley burst into tears. Other family members of the Hargan family, present in the courtroom, embraced each other and wept after the trial. Ashley chose not to comment and preferred to keep her future plans private. Megan and her husband have divorced, and their daughter is now living with her father in West Virginia. This case highlights how jealousy and conflict among siblings can escalate if not addressed early. Such tensions can arise from minor issues and may grow into deep-seated animosity, threatening the bonds between children and parents. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Fernando Pastorizo. A young couple in love found themselves in a toxic relationship that ended in tragedy. The investigation revealed that the situation was more complicated than it appeared, with disturbing secrets emerging. Nahir Galarza was born on September 11, 1998, in Gualeguaychú, Argentina, a city of about 100,000 residents known for its vibrant carnivals and its proximity to Uruguay. From a young age, Nahir was sociable and cheerful. She had a younger brother, who was 3 years her junior. Unlike Nahir, her younger brother faced developmental challenges and struggled with learning, eventually receiving a diagnosis of a disability. Nahir excelled in school and found learning languages easy. Their family was considered exemplary and happy, maintaining a well-organized home life. Their mother emphasized cleanliness, and Nahir developed a strong obsession with order, tidiness, and the habit of washing hands regularly. Her father was a police officer, and while the parents were strict, they indulged their children. Nahir aspired to become a lawyer, and after finishing high school, enrolled in the law program at Concepción del Uruguay University. She was also passionate about sports, play field hockey, engaging in daily training and massages to stay fit, and she enjoyed a vibrant social life filled with friends and parties. In 2012, when she was 14, Nahir met 15-year-old Fernando Gabriel Pastorizo at a bowling alley. Fernando, born on January 3, 1997, in Gualeguaychú, Argentina, was a cheerful and active young man from a respectable family who loved animals. This caught Nahir's attention, and they began dating. However, their relationship was tumultuous, characterized by frequent arguments and breakups that would be resolved just a few days later. Both were jealous and suspicious, which fueled their conflicts. In 2016, they went on a family trip to Brazil, during which they managed to enjoy their time together with hardly any disputes. It seemed like their relationship was improving, but issues continued to arise, and they still had cycles of arguing, breaking up, and reconciling. On Christmas Eve 2017, both Nahir and Fernando attended a party, but they arrived separately with their friends after having fought earlier. During the party, a brawl broke out between Fernando and another guy. The exact reason for the fight remains unclear, as Nahir, Fernando, and their friends provided conflicting explanations. Fernando claimed he was severely beaten, while Nahir stated that Fernando became jealous of her and started the altercation with the guy. On December 28, 2017, Nahir went for a massage. After her session, she discovered that her phone was dead. Remembering that she had left her charger at Fernando's home, she decided to go there and stayed the night. The next morning, Fernando drove her home on his motorcycle. Unfortunately, at dawn, a taxi driver discovered Fernando bleeding and called the police and an ambulance. By the time the ambulance arrived, it was too late. Fernando had died. The police discovered that he had been attacked twice near his motorcycle. News of the incident spread quickly, and at 7 a.m., Nahir, just waking up, learned about it. She posted a picture of them together on her social media, writing, "5 years together, quarrels and breakups, reconciliations, but always with love. I love you forever, my angel." Fernando's mother called Nahir to ask what had happened, but Nahir was unsure. Meanwhile, the police began gathering evidence at the crime scene and launched a murder investigation. Initially, they thought it might be a robbery, but this theory was ruled out since Fernando's money had not been taken. The area was typically calm and safe, with a low crime rate, raising questions about who could have killed Fernando and why. Investigators discovered that Fernando had been attacked with a 9mm pistol, a type of weapon usually used by police. This raised suspicions that a police officer might be involved. It was established that Fernando was first shot from behind at close range, likely by someone who approached him unnoticed. The assailant then moved in closer and shot him in the heart. Could the attacker have been someone he knew? This possibility was reinforced by the discovery of a second helmet at the scene. The police began reviewing surveillance footage from the area and saw a girl leaving the scene at 5:22 a.m., but her face was not visible. Nahir soon became a suspect and was summoned to the police station for questioning. During the interview, she confidently claimed that Fernando had driven her home that night. She stated that she showered, went to bed, and later woke up to the news of the tragedy. She expressed her sorrow for Fernando in a social media post. Nahir appeared very distressed and was crying, leading the investigators to have no further questions for her. The police decided to interrogate Nahir's father, Marcelo Galarza, who is a police officer. He initially claimed he didn't know anyone named Fernando, but this was later proven false when photos from their trip to Brazil surfaced, showing them together. It became clear that Nahir's father was well acquainted with Fernando, leading to questions about why he lied. The police began to suspect that he might be involved in the crime, prompting his denial of knowing Fernando. They developed a theory that pointed to Marcelo's involvement, especially after discovering evidence related to a weapon. Forensic tests confirmed that this weapon belonging to Nahir's father was the weapon used to kill Fernando, making him the main suspect. Investigators considered possible motives, suspecting that he may have disliked Fernando because of his daughter's relationship with Fernando, which might have led to a confrontation that ended fatally. Then came a surprising twist. Nahir confessed to killing Fernando to protect her father, who was on the verge of being arrested. She claimed that Fernando had subjected her to physical violence, alleging that on the night of the incident, he had grabbed her hair and dragged her home, prompting her to attack him. However, questions arose about how she obtained a weapon for this act. It became evident that this was a premeditated action, as she had brought a weapon with her. Nahir had stolen her father's service pistol, which he kept in the fridge, and returned it after the murder, leaving her parents completely unaware. She was recorded on surveillance footage. When the police questioned her about why she fled and attempted to hide evidence, not contacting the police or an ambulance if she was innocent, Nahir explained that she was confused. At that moment, she didn't believe Fernando would die and didn't grasp the seriousness of the situation. Upon realizing that she had killed him, she became very distressed. Her friends and Fernando's friends provided conflicting accounts. Nahir's friends blamed Fernando, citing her frequent complaints about him, while his friends accused Nahir. Some even noted that their relationship was difficult to define, as they spent more time apart than together. Nahir had 5 other boyfriends, and Fernando likely had other girlfriends as well. Their messages were examined, revealing that Fernando appeared to be more of a victim in their relationship. Nahir was aggressive and threatened him, while the kind-hearted Fernando confided in friends about being physically abused when he tried to break up with her. He was exhausted from the relationship and sought a peaceful life without her. This may have motivated Nahir to kill him, driven by a desire for revenge over his wish to end their relationship. Later, Nahir claimed that she accidentally attacked Fernando while she was holding the weapon. She stated that they both fell off the motorcycle, and that was when the gun fired for the first time. After this, she picked up the weapon and accidentally shot him again. This explanation seemed highly unlikely. A ballistic expert stated that it was impossible for there to be 2 accidental shots. Even if the first shot was an accident, the second shot was definitely intentional. Surveillance footage showed her walking home at a normal pace, covering more than 20 blocks, which contradicted her claim of being in shock and confusion after the accidental attacking. A handwriting expert analyzed Nahir's writing and found that she displayed significant emotional instability, along with self-centered and manipulative traits. Her handwriting indicated egocentrism, a craving for attention, mood swings, impulsiveness, aggressiveness, a tendency to lie, and a desire for dominance and manipulation. Her handwriting also revealed that she was experiencing considerable emotional turmoil. Nahir was more complicated than she initially appeared. She had a contradictory, complex, pushy, and aggressive personality. It was discovered that at the age of 16, she had pulled a prank on her parents by faking her own kidnapping, leaving them terrified and shocked when they realized it was a joke. Before the trial, she underwent a psychiatric evaluation. The psychiatrist reported that she exhibited complete narcissism, was quick to anger, aggressive, and showed no remorse for her actions. Besides, she was diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder, which was linked to her desire for control. During the trial, Nahir displayed defiant behavior. She arrived in shorts, looked down on others with arrogance, frequently adjusted her hair, and flirted with those around her. Although she maintained that her actions were in self-defense, nobody found her story credible. Her father initially supported her, but later distanced himself from her. There was no evidence indicating that Nahir had experienced physical abuse from Fernando. The prosecution outlined the following events. Around 2 a.m., Fernando was driving Nahir home. Upon arriving, they entered an apartment and argued for about 2 hours. Fernando wanted to end their relationship, but Nahir disagreed. During this time, she secretly took her father's weapon, and they left for another location. While traveling down a dark, deserted street, Nahir asked Fernando to stop. She got off the motorcycle, attacked him in the back, and when he fell, she attacked him again. Afterward, she returned home. Once there, she took a shower to clean off the blood and gun residue from her hands, returned her father's gun to the fridge, changed her clothes, and went to sleep. On July 3, 2018, Nahir Galarza was found guilty of aggravated murder and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 35 years. This means she could be released when she is 54 years old. At 19, Nahir has become the youngest person in Argentina to receive a life sentence. She has filed 3 appeals against her conviction, but all have been denied, leaving the sentence unchanged. At this time, Nahir changed her statement. She claims that she is not guilty at all, and her father is the real killer, as he attacked Fernando. One interesting thing is that there is surveillance footage showing Nahir at home during the time of the murder, raising questions about her alibi. Her mother, Yamina Crow, who divorced Nahir's father, supports her daughter and believes in her innocence. Nahir has stated that she was afraid of her father and her uncle, who abused her, which led her to take the blame for the crime. She expresses concern for her mother and brother's safety. Nahir has also filed a lawsuit against her uncle. The case has attracted significant public attention, with mixed reactions from the community. Some people are indifferent, while others support Nahir and believe she is innocent. Conversely, some argue that she not only killed Fernando, but also ruined her own life. Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jody Herring. In the small town of Berlin, Vermont, there lived a young woman named Jody Herring. Born in 1975, she came from a large family. In her early years, Jody was known to be a happy child, close to her father, and naturally bright and energetic. However, as she grew older, Jody faced several tragic incidents. The first and most traumatic occurred when she was about 5 years old. Her father was found dead on the lawn of their family home. It was believed he ended his life, as a weapon with his fingerprints was found near his hand. Jody was home at the time, and her father's death came as a shock to her. She gradually became deeply saddened by the loss, but she and her family were convinced that her father had not intended to harm himself. Shortly before his death, Jody's father revealed that he always kept a weapon nearby, even hiding a weapon under his pillow at night. This weapon was found at the scene of his death, and witnesses reported that it was placed in his hand. Ultimately, it was concluded that he ended his life. Following this tragedy, Jody began experiencing frequent seizures, but her family did not seek help from a psychiatrist. The family's neglect towards Jody was evident in many ways, affecting her emotions and behavior as she grew up. Family members and others observed her sitting for hours, staring blankly into space, seemingly unaware of her surroundings. One aunt described Jody as being completely detached from the world, while another noted that Jody always had a lifeless expression during her youth. Jody faced abuse from her mother and some relatives. The neglect escalated to the point where, at just 11 years old, Jody and her 14-year-old brother were kicked out of their home by their mother. After that, Jody often slept in the back seat of a car, and during particularly difficult times, she stayed with her grandparents. As a result, Jody grew up in a troubling and challenging environment. At 17, she was abused, which led to her first pregnancy and the birth of her child. A few years later, she had 2 more children out of wedlock. As she entered adulthood, Jody faced uncertainty and distress. Her daily life revolved around drinking and using banned substances, and her mental health continued to decline without proper care. Despite being a mother of 3, Jody was homeless. She did not have stable housing and often moved in with relatives to avoid living on the streets. Jody had multiple encounters with law enforcement and was known to the authorities for various offenses. Her legal troubles began in November 1998, when, at 23 years old, she was arrested for driving under the influence. This incident resulted in several months in jail. In June 2001, Jody faced charges of selling counterfeit goods, and just 5 months later, she was convicted again of drunk driving. In May 2003, Jody was charged and convicted for possessing a banned substance. By November 2015, it became evident that she had repeatedly broken the terms of her probation. Concerned about her lifestyle, social services began to investigate how her children were being cared for. Unfortunately for Jody, but possibly better for her children, the Department of Children and Family Affairs took them away one by one. Ultimately, only one child remained in Jody's custody, while her other children were placed with foster parents. Jody tried her best to keep her youngest child close. However, when she and her youngest daughter became homeless, the school principal discovered this. He offered to help them, but during their conversations, he realized that Jody was very inconsistent in her reasoning, and her actions lacked logic. It was unclear whether this was due to her frequent use of banned substances or a decline in her mental health. Despite the offer of assistance, Jody firmly rejected help from the school. This made people who genuinely wanted to help her feel that she had no desire to change her bad habits for the sake of her youngest child. Therefore, the school principal decided that Jody was unable to care for her youngest daughter in her current mental state, prompting a call to the Department of Family and Children's Affairs once again. At this point, Jody was feeling increasingly anxious and fearful about the possibility of losing her last child. Sadly, her addiction overshadowed her anxiety. Even though she was homeless, Jody continued to drink and use banned substances, which further worsened her mental health. Her apathy and refusal to change eventually led to her youngest daughter being taken away for the child's safety. When Jody discovered that the school principal had reported her to the Department of Family and Children's Affairs, she became extremely angry. Witnesses said that Jody lost control and was unable to think clearly. She expressed a desire to harm everyone involved in taking her children. She was consumed by her anger and sought revenge, blaming those around her. She showed her partner, Henry Premont, a handwritten list of people she wanted to kill, starting with her two cousins, Rhonda and Regina. It was clear that Jody was having dangerous thoughts. She attempted to buy a weapon twice but was denied both times after background checks. In May 2015, Jody's emotional and mental state began to deteriorate when she called Rhonda and Regina and threatened them. They found the call very disturbing, so they called emergency services to check on Jody. When the ambulance arrived, they found Jody lying on her bed in a semi-conscious state, surrounded by empty pill bottles and photos of her children, indicating a possible attempt to end her life. Following this incident, Jody was mandated to undergo mental health treatment at a nearby facility for 90 days. This treatment was intended to help Jody recover and get the support she needed. However, Jody was disruptive and did not want to continue treatment. Instead, she asked to be released. Consequently, just a month later, she was released, despite the doctor's recommendation to continue. The doctor had highlighted her instability, but his advice was not binding, and the facility decided to let her go. Unfortunately, she returned to her old environment, making the decision of the medical facility a mistake for which they had to suffer the consequences. On August 7, 2015, in the small town of Berlin, Vermont, Tiffany, Rhonda's daughter and Jody's niece, was preparing to visit a friend. Before leaving, she stopped to listen to a message on the answering machine. In the message, she heard Jody's angry voice, warning that Rhonda and Regina should stop calling the department, or she would kill them. Tiffany wasn't worried because such outbursts were typical of Jody's behavior, so she ignored the message and continued to meet her friend. Just 2 hours later, Jody's brother Dwayne received 2 voice messages from her. He was busy and couldn't answer the phone in time, but in the messages, Jody urged him to contact her immediately, saying he might regret not contacting her sooner. Jody leaves her temporary home and goes to the place she hates the most, the Department of Children and Families. When she arrived, she turned off the car and sat inside, seemingly waiting for something. Passers-by saw her screaming in the car, but it appeared she was only talking to herself. Despite her distress, no one stopped to check on her. They were all too busy with their own lives. It was unclear why Jody was outside the Department of Children and Family Affairs. Perhaps she was waiting for someone, but her children were in the care of others and could not be there. Shortly after 5 p.m., a woman named Laura Sobel emerged from the building. Laura, 48 years old, is a social worker with the Vermont Department of Children and Families. She was recognized for her intelligence. She attended the University of Vermont, earning a bachelor's degree in political science in 1989, followed by a master's degree in social work. Since 2002, she had dedicated herself to the Department of Children and Family Affairs, where she found her passion for helping those in need. At the beginning of her career, Laura met Timothy Farini. They fell in love, moved in together, and had 2 beautiful daughters, Julia and Ilona. Laura had a kind heart and was committed to supporting families who were less fortunate than her own. Laura was assigned to handle Jody's case, a decision made without any specific reasoning. This assignment could have easily gone to another available social worker. However, Jody perceived the situation differently. She blamed Laura for her daughter's removal, which is why she was waiting in the parking lot. On August 7, 2015, Laura finished her work as usual. After a long and tiring day, she felt relieved to leave and spend time with her family. As Laura exited the building, Jody stepped out of her car. Before closing the door, Jody retrieved a large object from inside. It was a weapon. Jody approached Laura, and she didn't have time to escape. Jody suddenly raised the weapon and attacked Laura in the face. After Laura collapsed, Jody attacked her again at close range, killing her instantly. Jody began jumping around the parking lot, brandishing the weapon and shouting that they deserved it for taking her 9-year-old daughter away. It was evident that Jody was aware of her actions. After she placed the weapon on the sidewalk, 2 bystanders quickly knocked her to the ground. Jody did not struggle. Instead, she calmly waited for the police to arrive. She had accomplished her goal, and nothing else mattered to her. When the police showed up, they noticed that Jody appeared calm and even laughed. As an officer helped her up, he spotted a red stain on her boot and asked her about it. Jody smirked, brushed it off with her boot, and described it as a trifling matter. In reality, it was Laura's blood. Jody was promptly taken into custody. Following her arrest, a more tragic story began to emerge. On the morning of Jody's arrest, her niece Tiffany, unaware of the situation, decided to visit her mother Rhonda, Aunt Regina, and grandmother Julianne Falzerano. Tiffany hadn't heard from them in almost a day, which was unusual since they typically called daily. By 8 a.m., Tiffany was driving to their house on Airport Road in Berlin. When she and her friend arrived, they noticed the front door was wide open. As they entered, Tiffany was met with a horrifying sight. She found her mother and grandmother lying on the floor, both dead. They had been attacked in the head. Tiffany hurried upstairs, anxious to find Regina alive, but sadly, her aunt had also been killed. It appeared that Regina had fought back before she died, and the police were called. After a thorough investigation, detectives discovered that the bullets came from the weapon that Jody had used. Devastated and searching for answers, Tiffany could only think of one person who could have harmed her family, Jody Herring. As a result, the charges against Jody changed from 1 murder to multiple counts of murder, leaving the community in shock. The trial received significant media attention, particularly concerning Jody's mental health. Psychiatrists conducted a comprehensive evaluation and diagnosed her with severe anxiety disorder. This condition likely contributed to her inability to trust others and her repeated refusal of available help. Nevertheless, this mental health issue did not exempt her from facing legal consequences. Jody was declared sane and competent to stand trial. During the trial, Jody appeared emotionally detached, often staring blankly. However, she expressed her true feelings when talking to Rhonda and Regina's family. She said that she had never been a bad person in her life and wished she could go back to that day, although she also admitted that it was impossible. The jury learned that the weapon used in the killings belonged to her partner, Henry Premont, with whom she had been living, and that she had taken the weapon without his knowledge. After the trial, Jody Herring was found guilty of second-degree murder for the deaths of her cousins, Rhonda and Regina, as well as her aunt, Julianne Falzarano. She received a 20-year sentence for each life lost. Additionally, she was convicted of first-degree murder for the murder of Lara Sobel, resulting in a life sentence without the chance of parole. Later, she attempted to appeal her sentence, but the court denied her request due to concerns that she would remain a danger to herself and society. In conclusion, Jody will spend the rest of her life in prison. Some may feel sympathy for her because she lost her children, but her cruel actions mean she will never see them again. This case has raised many questions about the role of social workers and how to prevent crimes linked to mental health. For instance, why was Jody allowed to leave the psychiatric ward so soon despite her emotional instability? Would staying in treatment have made a difference? How did Jody gain access to weapons, and are social workers being adequately protected from dangerous individuals? Jody's actions have caused immense suffering, affecting both the Herring family and Lara's family, as well as her own. Lara's children will grow up without a mother, and Tiffany will suffer the effects of losing her family. After Lara's death, the University of Vermont, where she earned her degrees, offered full scholarships for her children to honor her. While improvements are slow, there is an ongoing effort to enhance the safety of social workers. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lori Bray. Lori Bray lives in the small town of Laurel, in Yellowstone County, Montana. Lori, who is 57 years old, is known for being friendly and welcoming. She lives in a quiet area with her 2 dogs. Her friends and neighbors consider her to be one of the nicest people around. Every day, she calls her children and grandchildren. Lori maintains close relationships with her family and neighbors. Lori works at a casino, and on September 30, 2019, she finished her shift and went home around midnight. She was supposed to report to work at 8:30 a.m. on October 1, but she did not show up. This was unusual because Lori is very responsible in her job. When the manager tried to call Lori but was unsuccessful, she decided to check on Lori herself to find out what was going on. The manager started driving around her workplace, hoping to see Lori. On a deserted road, she spotted a car that looked similar to Lori's. From a distance, it seemed like something was off about the location of the car and the surrounding area, as it was parked in a place surrounded by fields. She decided not to approach the car because she wasn't sure if it was indeed Lori's. Instead, she parked at a safe distance and called Lori's son to express her concern about Lori's disappearance. Lori's son mentioned that he hadn't received his mother's usual morning call, which was unusual and made him worried. He had also tried calling her earlier, but her phone did not respond to either calls or texts. Lori's son returned home to find his mother's car missing from its usual spot. No one answered the door when he knocked. He looked through the window, but saw no one inside. The dogs were there, appearing restless, which worried him because Lori always took care of her pets and never let them go hungry. It seemed that his mother might not have come home from work. He looked around the house but did not notice anything unusual. Using his key to enter, he saw that the bed was made, but none of his mother's belongings were there. The kettle was cold, indicating that she had not cooked breakfast or spent the night there. Concerned, he called his mother's manager to inform her that Lori was not home. He suspected that his mother had not returned from work and mentioned that the car the manager had seen was likely Lori's, suggesting that they check on it. The manager agreed to check on the car and waited for him to arrive. As he drove up, they approached a 2003 Lexus, which was unlocked and clearly Lori's car. They opened the door and looked inside, finding Lori's purse and her cell phone, which was still on. The phone had several missed calls. They decided not to continue searching the car to avoid losing any evidence and quickly called the police. When the police arrived and opened the car, they immediately noticed some alarming signs: blood stains on the driver's seat, a boot print, and Lori's dirty shoes. Lori's torn clothes were found, indicating that a struggle had taken place. This evidence suggested that something terrible had happened. As a result, the police began searching for her, fearing that she might have been attacked and possibly killed. The community around Lori's home reacted strongly to her disappearance. Many people shared information about her on social media, distributed flyers, and actively participated in the search efforts. The area was very quiet, with almost no incidents. Attacks were rare and caused a strong reaction from the local people. The media covered the case, hoping to draw attention and find anyone who might know something about the events of that tragic night, but no one came forward. The case left the community extremely uneasy, as residents feared that a dangerous killer was still on the loose. Concerned locals knew that Lori had set up a fund to support her family and care for the dogs she had left behind. Lori's car was found in a large area filled with fields, dirt, and grass, making it difficult for the police to find clues. Many people joined the search the next morning. Meanwhile, police discovered that around 1 a.m., the local sheriff had come across Lori's car but had not conducted a thorough search. Surveillance footage from the casino showed no suspicious activity. Lori was performing her routine duties, cleaning up after her shift, and then went home without incident. Police sought witnesses who had been at the casino that day to see if anyone had noticed anything unusual. They interviewed several visitors, but did not receive any useful information. The surveillance footage showed that there were only a few customers in the casino that day. In the hours before she left, Lori had only a few brief interactions with customers, including 2 women at the bar and a man who arrived at the casino around 11 p.m. Lori served him a drink and checked his ID, which was part of her standard procedure to confirm he was of legal age. The young man remained at the casino until late at night. Nothing unusual happened inside the casino after that. The young man calmly left, followed by Lori. Meanwhile, the police began reviewing the security footage from outside the casino. Lori left the casino with her belongings, locked the doors, and got into her car just after midnight. Before leaving, she had a brief conversation with the same young man who had left before her. After their conversation, he got into the passenger seat of her car, and they drove away together. The casino was deserted at this point, leading to suspicions that this man was the last person to see Lori before she disappeared. The police needed to identify this man. They showed the surveillance footage to casino employees and customers, who recognized him as 24-year-old Diego Hernandez. The police decided to speak to him immediately and went to his registered address. Diego confirmed that he was the person in the video. He explained that he had asked Lori for a ride because he had been at the casino too long and had no way to get home. Lori agreed to drive him, and after dropping him off, she left. Diego then went to another party to continue his night, claiming that he never saw Lori again. Although Diego's explanation seemed plausible, the police remained suspicious of the fresh scratches on his hands and face. They asked him about the source of the scratches. Diego claimed that he had gotten into an argument with a friend before going to the casino, and that a ring with a sharp edge had caused the injuries. He spoke calmly and confidently, answering the police's questions without hesitation, which made him seem trustworthy. The police found no inconsistencies in his story, and they therefore left. Diego's alibi needed to be verified. as there were no other leads to pursue. The police spoke to the friend who had allegedly argued with Diego shortly before Lori's disappearance. The friend confirmed that they had met a few days earlier, but insisted that there had been no fight. The police reviewed the casino security footage again to see if there were any scratches on Diego's face, but the video quality was poor. They then discovered that he had been to a bar before going to the casino and requested the bar's surveillance camera footage. This footage confirmed that there were no visible scratches on his face. While they continued to gather information, a man reported to the police at 7:30 p.m. that he had seen the body of a woman while driving an ATV in the woods. The police quickly arrived at the scene and located the woman's body, lying in a ditch and covered in mud. They believe the body found is Lori, who is missing. The body had multiple severe injuries, indicating that the attacker may have kicked or hit her several times. Lori's body was found 3 kilometers from her car, and there were multiple scratches on her body, especially on her face, which was severely injured. Forensic experts later determined that she had 2 broken ribs and signs of strangulation. Lori was not killed at the scene where her body was found. It had been brought there later. There was evidence of dragging on her back. It is possible that she was killed in the car where bloodstains were found or nearby. During the investigation, the police found a clear shoe print at the scene that matched the shoe print inside Lori's car. This shoe print could be important evidence and should be compared with the shoes of Diego, who is a suspect. The autopsy results showed that Lori died from strangulation. Experts found evidence that she had been abused, as some of the wounds on her body contained male DNA. The police continued to investigate the information provided by Diego. They checked the data related to the location of Lori's phone and found that she had never been to Diego's house, contrary to his claims. This further cast doubt on his credibility. Furthermore, in interviews with employees from another bar that Diego had previously visited, the police learned that he had harassed the staff there. He acted aggressively and rudely, insisting that they give him a ride home, but all the employees refused. The police gathered enough evidence to obtain a search warrant for Diego's home. They discovered a pair of Nike sneakers, which were subsequently sent to a lab for analysis. It was found that the sneakers had recently been washed. The results indicated that the sneakers matched the shoe prints found in Lori's car. The police also found the clothes that Diego had been wearing at the bar and casino on the day Lori went missing. However, these items had been thoroughly washed with bleach. The clothes were sent for testing to check for blood or DNA evidence, but unfortunately, no traces were found after the washing. The police examined Diego's phone and found suspicious search queries, such as "How long does an investigation last?" and "When do FBI agents get involved in an investigation?" Diego was therefore brought in for further questioning, and a DNA sample was taken from him to compare with the sample found on Lori's body. During re-interrogation, Diego became nervous and changed his story. He said that he and Lori had known each other for a long time. Diego claimed that they had stopped in a secluded area to talk and smoke. Afterwards, they got intimate in Lori's car, and after a short conversation, he left without knowing what would happen next. The police conducting the interrogation were skeptical of his story because it was completely out of character for Lori. Those who knew Lori found it hard to believe that a woman who spent all her free time with her children and grandchildren could be involved with someone so much younger. Furthermore, Lori had previously escaped a toxic relationship and had sworn off her private life, promising never to date again. Even if there was some connection between her and Diego, it was hard to believe that he would leave immediately after their meeting, leaving her alone in the car in the middle of a field. The police believed that Diego's story was a lie and that he was responsible for the crime, so they continued to gather more evidence. Feeling pressured, Diego changed his story again, claiming that he had been secretly dating Lori for over a year. However, a thorough examination of their phone records revealed that this was false. They had not communicated with each other and had not called or texted, making it difficult to believe that their relationship was serious and long-lasting. In fact, it seemed that they had never even met before that tragic night. If they had really been together for a year, why had Lori not introduced him to her friends or family? And why had she asked for his ID if they already knew each other? These inconsistencies made his story seem completely unbelievable. On October 8, 2019, Diego Hernandez was arrested for first-degree murder. The news shocked the local community, as they knew Diego to be a calm and polite person who had never shown cruelty or violence. The prosecution said, Diego asked Lori for a ride, and she, trusting him, agreed without questioning his true intentions. During the ride, Diego made inappropriate advances toward Lori, who refused him. In response, he attacked her, overpowering her in a secluded area where he abused and strangled her. Tests confirmed the presence of Diego's DNA under Lori's fingernails, indicating that she had fought for her life and attempted to scratch his face in self-defense. The trial of Diego Hernandez began in March 2021. Despite overwhelming evidence against him, Diego maintained his innocence, claiming he had a romantic relationship with Lori, a claim that was refuted by her children, friends, and co-workers who knew her well. After 2 hours of deliberation, the jury unanimously found Diego Hernandez guilty of first-degree murder, citing clear evidence that the crime was premeditated. Diego then astonished everyone by admitting his guilt. He was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving only 35 years. He has since been incarcerated in Montana. Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case, the case of Laverne K. Parsons. Laverne K. Parsons and Rebecca Sears were neighbors who developed a strong friendship, becoming almost like sisters. Rebecca had a good relationship with both Laverne and her husband, David Parsons. However, their bond evolved into a mutual dependence that hinted at deeper issues. This marked the beginning of a troubling story that would have a significant impact on their entire town. In Grovetown, Georgia, USA, a worker called the emergency services. The dispatcher reported that the front door of the Parsons home was damaged, which looked like a break-in. Concerned about a crime, the worker alerted the police. When officers arrived, they found the house open and moved toward the garage. Inside, they discovered the front door smeared with blood, along with large amounts of blood on the walls and floor. In the middle of the garage, there was a woman's body, so badly mutilated that it looked as if she had been attacked by a bear. As the investigation unfolded, more horrific details about the incident emerged. In the spring of 2005, the Parsons family relocated to Grovetown, Georgia. This small town, with a population of about 15,000, was known for its peaceful and friendly atmosphere, making it one of the safest places in the state. The family, consisting of husband David, wife Laverne, and their 12-year-old son, had just settled into their new home. David, a career military man, had recently retired and was now working for a logistics. David and Laverne had been in love since high school, starting their relationship when Laverne was 17. Now, as a family with a growing son, they were filled with hope for their future in this community. Shortly after the Parsons moved in, they met their new neighbors, Tony and Rebecca Sears, who lived next door. The Sears family had 5 children, 2 of whom were adults from Rebecca's previous marriage. Rebecca worked as a manager at a medical center, while Tony was a truck driver. They had lived in the area for most of their lives and were known for being friendly and kind. Rebecca's older sons, Michael and Christopher Bowers, had taken different paths in life. Christopher, who had a stable job at the same clinic as his mother, lived independently and spent his free time on his motorcycle. In contrast, Michael struggled with serious substance abuse issues. He often faced difficulties and had trouble finding work, relying on his parents for support while living at home. Despite this, Rebecca consistently helped him by bringing him to her office, where he occasionally found odd jobs, such as mowing lawns or taking out the trash, earning small tips for his work. During one of the office visits, some money went missing. The management suspected Michael, who had a troubled past and struggled with addiction, of stealing it. Although they couldn't prove anything, and he was not formally charged, the situation cast a shadow over the Sears family. This is a common issue in small towns. Everyone knows each other's business, and even minor troubles can spark rumors. Despite this, the friendship between the new neighbors, who were unaware of the Sears family's difficulties, continued to grow. After they moving in, Rebecca helped her new friend find a job at the physical therapy office, which brought them closer together. They began to spend a lot of time together, enjoying daily conversations and bonding. Later, the whole group went on a cruise where they played doubles tennis, becoming best friends and nearly inseparable. Everything seemed perfect until a tragedy struck in 2009, revealing the true nature of the deceitful criminal hiding behind the facade of a respectable person. Laverne started receiving anonymous text messages on her phone suggesting that her husband was cheating on her with her best friend, Rebecca. Laverne brought this up with Rebecca, but Rebecca dismissed it as a bad joke. Despite Rebecca's denial, the rumors spread, and soon everyone in town was talking about it. Laverne then confronted her husband to discover the truth, but he denied any wrongdoing. However, this still unsettled Laverne and distressed her. Although they had previously enjoyed a good relationship, mistrust began to grow after the messages. Later, Rebecca felt guilty and confessed to her husband that she had indeed been having an affair with their neighbor. She reassured him that it was over and took responsibility for her actions, admitting that the affair had lasted several months. Rebecca apologized to her husband, believing that by doing so, she was easing her conscience. She failed to realize that her husband would be shocked by the revelation and wouldn't simply overlook it. After hearing Rebecca's confession, her husband called Laverne to tell her about his wife's infidelity, revealing that Rebecca had cheated on him with Laverne's husband. Laverne confronted her husband and told him that she had discovered his lie. David apologized, wanting to save their marriage for their son's sake, and she forgave him. Afterward, Laverne decided to quit her job to avoid seeing her husband's mistress and cut off all communication with their neighbors. She even considered selling their house to move far away from the Sears family and start fresh. However, after the house was listed for sale, a series of events began to unfold with tragic results. About a month passed without any contact between the former best friends. During this time, David was on a business trip in California. One evening, he called his wife, but after a short conversation, he broke down and called their neighbor, Rebecca. He confessed to her that he still had feelings for her and wanted to be with her. Their conversation quickly turned into flirting, and then phone intimate. Unknowingly, David triggered a series of events that would lead to serious consequences. The next morning, March 25, 2009, David called his wife, but she didn't answer. This was unusual because she was not working that day and was usually home. After several attempts to reach Laverne, he called her friend Tamara to see if she knew where Laverne was, but Tamara had no information. He then called Rebecca, but she said she also hadn't heard from Laverne. Hours passed without any contact. That morning, a repairman arrived at the Parsons house to complete a repair. He knocked on the front door, but no one answered. He tried calling the homeowner's mobile phones, but they didn't respond. Concerned, he went around to the back door and noticed that the glass was broken, with shards scattered on the floor, and there were visible bloodstains just inside the door. Realizing that something was wrong, the repairman chose not to enter the house and instead called emergency services. Within minutes, the nearest police patrol and ambulance arrived. When the officers entered the house, they followed the blood trails on the floor, which led them to the garage. There, they found Laverne lying in a pool of blood, with a bloody hammer and baseball bat next to her. The paramedics detected a faint pulse and quickly transported her to the hospital's intensive care unit, where doctors worked to save her life. The police investigated the crime scene and found no evidence of abuse assault on the victim. However, several valuable items, including a gold necklace and a watch, were missing, and the house was in chaos. The bedroom mattress had been overturned, and all the drawers were pulled out. Notably, cash and other valuables were left untouched, leading the police to conclude that this was not a typical burglary, as real burglars usually take cash. It appeared that the scene of the struggle had been staged, so investigators considered it a violent attack with the intent to kill rather than a robbery. A woman was intentionally attacked in her home, shocking the detectives with the brutality of the crime. Later, a neighbor named Rebecca called the police to report a burglary at her house. Fortunately, Rebecca and her family were not home, and nothing was stolen. It seemed the burglar had been frightened off and left without taking anything. This raised questions for the detectives. Could this incident really have been a simple burglary? Meanwhile, Laverne was fighting for her life in the hospital, and the police hoped she would recover enough to provide information about her attacker. Unfortunately, her injuries were too severe, and the doctors were not optimistic about her recovery. Her husband was informed of the attack and rushed to the hospital. When he arrived, doctors told him she had no chance of waking up and could only be kept alive by machines. After careful consideration, he made the painful decision to turn off his wife's life support. Laverne, 41, died in the hospital just a day after the emergency call was made. The first person the police interrogated was the repairman who discovered the break-in at the house and called for emergency services. This incident occurred at 8:30 in the morning, which seemed unusually early for such work to the detectives. Raising their suspicions, they found it odd that he was walking around the house, especially since he shouldn't have been attempting to enter through the back door. The police brought him in for questioning. The worker explained that he arrived early because that was the time agreed upon with Laverne, and he went to the back door because that was where he was scheduled to work. The Parsons family were preparing to tidy up parts of the house before selling it. The repairman passed the polygraph test, and his testimony was convincing, so he was quickly cleared as a suspect. However, he did provide the police with an important lead. While speaking with the emergency dispatcher, he noticed a suspicious young man sitting on the curb across the street from the house. When the police arrived, this young man mentioned that his house had also been robbed. The officers recognized him as 22-year-old Michael Bowers, Rebecca's eldest son, and confirmed that there were indeed signs of a break-in at his home. From the start of the investigation, Michael, the troubled son of the Sears family, kept coming up in the case. His behavior was puzzling. Could he really have taken a hammer and then a baseball bat to nearly kill the neighbor before casually crossing the street to rob his own house? He was present at both crime scenes until the police arrived, which seemed very strange. However, given his issues with illegal substances, his actions were unpredictable. The police decided to interview each member of the Sears family individually to compare their statements for consistency. The family patriarch was away on a trip and could not be questioned. The first person interviewed was Christopher, the 19-year-old brother, who appeared very anxious. He explained that he had left home early that morning with their mother to go to work at the medical center and was far from home at the time of the crime. Christopher quickly began to point fingers at Michael, claiming that his brother, who struggled with addiction, often acted inappropriately and aggressively, which could have triggered the conflict. Christopher believed that Michael's substance abuse might have pushed him toward violent behavior. Next in the interrogation room was the suspect, Michael, who appeared unwell. He surprised the investigators by confessing to his banned substance addiction. Michael acknowledged that his addiction was harmful, and he expressed that he needed help because he couldn't manage it on his own. He also admitted to using substances on the same day as the interrogation. Desperate, he felt that he had no choice. If he didn't use, he would face withdrawal symptoms during his conversation with the detectives, making it impossible for him to speak. On the day of the crime, Michael left home early in the morning to look for a job at his father's suggestion, but he was unsuccessful. When he returned at 8:30, he found the back door of his house forced open, indicating a possible burglary. Surprised, he called his mother to inform her about the break-in. While waiting for her to arrive, he began to inspect the area around the house. During this time, a repairman showed up at the neighboring house. A few minutes later, police sirens were heard, and officers arrived on the scene. Because of this, Michael chose not to enter his house and instead waited outside, thinking the events were connected. At the crime scene, a patrolman asked Michael to show the soles of his shoes. A detective noticed a shard of glass lodged in the tread, which Michael could not explain. It was likely just a random piece of glass he stepped on while checking the area. Overall, he appeared clean and had no blood on him, but the police began to doubt his story. As a result, he became the main suspect in the murder case. Michael denied any involvement in the burglary or the murder of his neighbor. The police discovered that he had legal troubles and struggled with sobriety. They also learned that his mother planned to kick him out of the house due to her frustration with supporting him. This situation raised suspicions that he might have committed a crime out of desperation. The next person to be questioned was Christopher. He confirmed Michael's alibi with precise timing, stating that he saw Michael leave home for his part-time job. As a result, the police had to release Michael as a suspect. The younger children were not interrogated due to their age. During her questioning, Rebecca appeared upset and expressed concern about what had happened, asking about her friend's condition. However, her emotional response seemed insincere. Despite this, she had a strong alibi. She was at work during the time of the attack. While the investigation was still underway, another crime occurred just 36 hours after the murder. The victim this time was Rebecca Sears. One evening, as she was leaving her office, a dark-skinned man approached her with a weapon and demanded money. When she refused, he attacked her in the leg and threatened that next time he would attack her in the face if she didn't comply, then fled the scene. Terrified, Rebecca called the police. Fortunately, her injuries were not life-threatening. In less than 3 days, 2 attempted robberies and murders had occurred, involving 2 families who were once close friends and neighbors. What had gone wrong in this quiet suburb? The detectives faced the difficult task of solving this complicated mystery. Meanwhile, the funeral for Laverne, who had been brutally murdered, took place. One of her friends spoke with the grieving widower, David, who appeared deeply affected by his loss and was openly crying. However, he made a remark that raised suspicion, saying he never would have wanted things to end this way. Some witnesses found his words sincere, while others thought they hinted at his possible involvement in the crime. With many rumors circulating about the 2 families, every statement from David became fodder for speculation. The police soon caught wind of this and began to view David as a potential suspect, as cases of spouses killing each other are not uncommon. However, the detectives lacked evidence against him, and David had a credible alibi. He was confirmed to be on a business trip in another state at the time of the murder. The investigator considered the possibility that he might have been involved in the murder, specifically as the organizer of the crime, by looking into details of his life. They called him in for questioning. He truthfully admitted to having an affair with his neighbor Rebecca, which his wife had recently discovered. Despite this, they chose not to divorce and instead decided to work through their issues together. They even started planning to move, which is why he had placed an advertisement to sell their house. The husband maintained that he was not involved in his wife's murder, stating that he loved her even though he was seeing the neighbor. Unexpected assistance in the investigation came from an unexpected source. the police station received a call from a prison inmate. He wanted to share information about the murder. He is Rebecca Sears' cousin. The inmate revealed that just before the incident, Rebecca had confided in him about her affair with David. She expressed concerns that her relationship was in danger because of David's wife, whom she viewed as a barrier to their happiness. Rebecca mentioned that she had tried to create tension between David and his wife by sending anonymous texts about his alleged infidelities, but those efforts had failed. Their marriage remained intact, and David's wife had forgiven him. David and Laverne was planning to relocate, which meant Rebecca risked losing David for good. She was deeply infatuated with him, and a phone call from David the day before the murder indicated that his feelings for her were strong as well. Rebecca viewed her former best friend Laverne as the rival she needed to confront, and she was determined to act to prevent David from moving away. In this context, she approached her cousin and asked if he knew any acquaintances with criminal backgrounds who could eliminate her rival for a significant payment and make it look like an accident to avoid suspicion. However, he refused to get involved in any criminal activity, and she left. Later, when he heard about the tragedy, he realized it might have been connected to Rebecca's earlier conversation. The police acted on this new lead. By this time, they had already discovered a love triangle involving the neighbors and suspected that either Laverne's husband or Rebecca could have killed her. They found this theory believable and began to verify the information they had gathered. At this point, Christopher was identified as a second suspect. He had a close relationship with his mother, Rebecca, who financially supported her sons, which gave her significant influence over them. It turned out that Rebecca was also funding Michael's banned substance use, as she had introduced him to illegal substances. However, Michael's relationship with their mother had recently become strained. The police continued to speak with Rebecca's cousin, who identified the murder weapon as a hammer. While it was known that a baseball bat belonged to the victim's son, the source of the hammer had been unclear until now. The cousin confirmed that he had seen the hammer in a toolbox in Rebecca's garage. Following this revelation, a wealth of incriminating evidence against the mastermind of the murder began to emerge. The detectives obtained a search warrant for Rebecca's SUV and discovered small bloodstains on the floor. Lab tests confirmed that the blood belonged to the victim. The investigators were now convinced that Rebecca was the mastermind behind the murder, with her son Christopher as the actual perpetrator. The final step was to piece together all the evidence and charge both individuals involved in the crime. Detectives brought Rebecca Sears back to the police station for further questioning. Unexpectedly, she confessed that she genuinely wanted Laverne dead because of her affection for Laverne's husband, David. She opened up about her affair with David and admitted that she had been sending messages to her former best friend, urging her to leave her marriage. Rebecca believed that by betraying Laverne, she could eliminate the only obstacle standing in the way of her happiness. However, Laverne was not willing to part ways, and Rebecca blamed her for the escalating situation. Rebecca claimed she never asked her son, Christopher, to kill Laverne. However, Christopher cared deeply for his mother, empathizing with her emotional struggles and her secret love. They had a close relationship, often discussing their feelings freely. Rebecca did not hide her pain from Christopher about not being able to be with David, and in a misguided attempt to help his mother, Christopher decided to eliminate David's wife for her sake. Christopher wanted to make his mother happy, and in return, she supported him with medications and even bought him a car. According to Rebecca's testimony, Christopher left home early in the morning and went to Laverne's house, where he confronted her. He broke the glass on the back door to enter while she was away. As she was dropping her son off at school, Christopher brought a hammer, waited for Laverne to return, and then attacked her. He initially used the baseball bat to hit her, but switched to using hammer for greater efficiency while she was lying on the ground. After the attack, Christopher called his mother to pick him up, and she arrived at the scene quickly. Rebecca noted that when he got into her car, he was covered in blood and claimed that the issue had been resolved. She was shocked and upset by what he had done, but instead of going to the police, she chose to help him. Christopher changed his clothes and disposed of the bloody ones. Later, Michael called to say that their home had been robbed. It turned out that Christopher had faked a burglary to make it seem like he was innocent. Additionally, Rebecca fabricated a story about an attack near her office, where she encourages Christopher to attack her leg. Rebecca made the story appear realistic to confuse the police, suggesting that someone was stalking their family. Ultimately, she claimed to be a victim in this situation and insisted that Christopher acted on his own when he killed Laverne. The police were appalled by the cynicism and cowardice displayed by Rebecca, who exploited her own son for her gain. The lead investigator, with 32 years of experience, had never witnessed such cruelty. On April 22, 2009, Rebecca and her son Christopher were arrested and charged with armed robbery and murder, both pleading not guilty. Remarkably, Rebecca testified against her son in court, claiming she knew the location of Christopher's bloody clothes. She intended to offer this information in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence, as both she and her son were facing the death penalty in Georgia due to the severity of the crime. A plea deal was reached, and Rebecca indicated that the evidence was hidden in her mother's attic, which was later confirmed. Upon finding the clothes, investigators discovered drops of blood on them that belonged to the victim, Laverne. The townspeople were shocked to discover Rebecca's true character. Not only did she exploit her son for her own selfish purposes, but she also attempted to frame him to escape the death penalty. During the trial, more troubling information emerged. The owner of the clinic where Rebecca worked as a manager alleged that large amounts of money had been disappearing from the accounts since Rebecca started her job. An internal investigation confirmed that Rebecca had embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars. While her son was wrongfully suspected, it was Rebecca who had been stealing from the company all along. Michael's accusation of theft was a result of his mother's actions, as she had once tried to implicate him. Thankfully, the situation was resolved, and he was not charged in the criminal case. In the murder case, both defendants accepted a plea deal to receive lighter sentences and avoid the death penalty. In May 2012, Rebecca Sears pleaded guilty to murder, armed robbery, and burglary. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for murder, another life sentence for armed robbery, and an additional 20 years for burglary. The court ordered that these sentences be served consecutively, meaning she will never be released. She is currently in Lee Arundel State Prison, Georgia. In the same month, Christopher, who also pleaded guilty, received a life sentence without parole for murder, another life sentence for armed robbery, and 20 years for burglary. Like his mother, Christopher Bowers will remain incarcerated indefinitely.